The tale opens with our hero Tarasadu, striking a goblin with a well-aimed arrow, joined by a crowd of onlookers. He reveled in his triumph, basking in the pride of his precise shot. Suddenly, a rustle nearby revealed a towering goblin snarling with rage. The colossal creature slammed the earth in fury, launching a massive boulder at him. Stunned yet swift, he narrowly evaded the projectile. Regaining his balance, he notched an arrow, took aim at the giant goblin, and released it. Pterosaur, an adventurer with a lifelong yearning to explore another realm. From childhood, he was captivated by tales of isekai adventures. In grade school, he founded a magic club, diving deep into mystical studies. His obsession drew media attention, briefly tempting him to abandon his dream. Yet, his desire for a different world remained unshakable. He enrolled in a renowned university, celebrated for its rigorous scholarship. There, he earned a chance to join its ancient dark magic society. His dedication bore fruit, and he eagerly declared the next day as his moment of destiny. His life's work had been devoted to discovering a path to another world. He knew most stumbled into such realms by chance, like a collision with a starlit truck. But he was determined to cross over deliberately. He swore to forge lasting friendships and conquer epic quests. He dreamed of thriving in the isekai universe he'd always envisioned. Staring at the sigil he'd crafted, he felt its profound significance. He dug through his satchel, retrieved a small blade, and pricked his finger lightly. Letting his blood drip onto the sigil, he trusted the society's storied past and his meticulous calculations to complete the ritual. As the blood met the sigil's heart, he lifted his arms and anticipated the unfolding of fate. But when no change occurred, he frantically circled the sigil, trying to spark its power to no avail. In his panic, he spotted his rigid stuffed toy on a shelf, seized it, and set it within the sigil, whispering an apology for its role as an offering. He placed the teddy bear at the center, asking if this would suffice. After a brief wait with no response, disappointment washed over him. He questioned why the ritual remained inert. Rising, he gazed at his teddy bear one last time, turned to walk away from the sigil. Then, a radiant glow burst from the sigil, startling him. In disbelief, he wondered if this was truly the moment. Overjoyed, he proclaimed his success at last. But then, Hans's hands, clamped around his throat, bewildering him. The grip hoisted him, choking his breath, and he perished within moments. Gradually, his eyes fluttered open. A voice announced to a divine presence that he was coming to. Fully awake, he saw a woman and an elderly man before him. The old man chastised him for his reckless act, leaving him anxious and perplexed. The elderly sage revealed a cryptic mechanism and invited him to examine it closely. He was stunned to encounter a broadcast declaring that in the Empire University Club chamber, a senior student, Teru Sato, had been discovered lifeless. This sparked a chilling thought. Was he the one who had perished? The realization dawned that he was now among the departed. Yet, with a spark of optimism, he inquired if the enchantment still held its power. The sage, with a hint of exasperation, confirmed it did, but noted that on Earth, deities never shared the secrets of magic with mortals, making it astonishing that he had stumbled upon it through his own exploration. The sage acknowledged the feat as remarkable, but clarified that the arcane sigil he crafted was not for travel, but for rebirth. He pressed the sage for clarification. The sage elaborated that it was an unfinished design, lacking a defined goal or destination. After a brief pause, panic surged. He exclaimed that he had botched it terribly. Once composed, he told the sage he needed to shift his mindset, and with eager curiosity, asked if he was destined for rebirth. Reflecting on his lifelong fascination with alien realms, he resolved not to squander this opportunity. If death had claimed him, he might as well venture to another existence. The sage affirmed his reincarnation, but revealed that such practices had been outlawed ages ago, leaving him reeling. The sage added that it was only recently permitted again due to the soul recycling decree. He probed the sage about the meaning of this soul recycling law, and the sage explained that, essentially, using magic for rebirth was deemed self-destruction, as it entailed his death. Staggered by the revelation, he questioned if he had truly taken his own life. The sage declared that self-destruction was a grave sin, and such an act would weigh heavily against him in the rebirth cycle. Moreover, some schemed to preserve their past abilities, often leading to dire fates in their new lives. He asked the sage how grim these fates could be, and the sage described horrors like being born only to perish instantly, entering a life of misery, sold into bondage by heartless kin, or even returning as beasts, fiends, or vermin, existences where mere survival was a blessing. The sage's words drained his color, and he cried out in terror that he could never endure such a fate. Trembling, he pleaded with the sage to let him be anything but a beast, fiend, or insect. The sage, with a heavy heart, admitted his limited influence, yet he still inquired about cheat abilities. The sage, puzzled, asked a nearby woman what cheat abilities meant, but she merely shrugged, feigning ignorance. The sage clarified if he meant unique talents, explaining they existed but were far from invincible. With a hopeful tone, he asked the sage if he could possess such a talent in his next life, and the sage cautioned that while these abilities were valuable, they demanded time, effort, and often grueling conditions to unlock. He concluded that the gamble was worth it, even if it meant starting from a precarious position. He'd require talents far beyond the commonplace, so he implored the elder for the rarest, most extraordinary ability. The elder chuckled, pointing out his persistence despite all prior warnings. Being the first to reincarnate post-ban, the elder hinted he might entertain the idea, but fairness forbade favoritism. With a grave tone, the elder asked if he was truly committed to moving forward. His fists tightened, jaw clenched, and he boldly declared his assent, certain there was no turning back. The elder warned him against any misinterpretations, disclosing that all memories of his past life would be obliterated, leaving him reeling. Stunned, he admitted to the elder that this was news to him. The elder reiterated that favoritism was not allowed, prompting him to question if even their present dialogue would be wiped away. The elder affirmed that every trace would vanish before rebirth. No shortcuts could bypass the system. Alarms surged within him, and he nearly blurted out that he'd settle for an ordinary skill instead. Suddenly, a system alert flashed, revealing his death had been anything but natural. A radiant beam from the system struck his head, neck, chest, and enveloped his entire form. The light then plummeted straight to the earth. It descended into a vibrant city, gliding through throngs of chattering passers-by. A woman slipped into a shadowed alley where children were assaulting a lone figure, muttering that the victim had nothing worth stealing, making it a dull affair. The soul fused with the crumpled child on the ground, stirring the boy awake, who caught a glimpse of 3 kids sauntering off. His sight began to dim, eyelids fluttering shut, until a glow unveiled that his unique ability was a mystery, with only rebirth after death confirmed as its trait. Astonishingly, the recollections of his past life flooded back into his consciousness. He struggled to his feet, sensing peril nearby, aware he was in a precarious situation, yet certain he had not yet accomplished anything noteworthy. Gratitude washed over him for his successful rebirth and the restoration of his memories, strengthening his determination to not perish there. He was Tora Saru, formerly Terry Sato in his prior existence. At 6, during a ceremonial christening, he was marked with a useless ability known as garbled text. Enraged by this, his inebriated father abandoned him in a monster-infested forest. This abandonment drove him to escape to Seichi, a sizable town a few days' journey from his village. Existence was grueling, with meals so rare he ate only every few days. Tormented by hardship, he pondered his next steps. Destitute, feeble, and still a child, with adults showing no compassion, agony gripped him as he grappled with his next move. Penniless, frail, and merely a child with adults offering no sympathy. In this strange realm, the right course of action remained shrouded in mystery. He trudged along the streets, shrouding his face from passers-by. Pausing before a towering edifice, he realized it was the Adventurers Guild. As he pushed through the guild's doors, 4 figures swiftly encircled him, barking at him to leave, proclaiming this was the Adventurers Guild. Brushing off their taunts, he pressed forward, only for a rough grip to seize his coat, yanking him upward with a sharp command not to disregard them. A woman intervened, addressing the man as Mob and declaring that violence was unacceptable. Mob gently set him down, positioning him before the woman at the reception desk. She leaned in, murmuring that Mob had deliberately confronted him first to shield him from other adventurers' harassment. Glancing at Mob, he felt a wave of relief, grateful to have encountered a compassionate soul in this harsh world. He expressed his desire to register, only for her to reveal there was a registration fee, startling him as he exclaimed that this was unexpected. A strange sense of familiarity washed over him. He inquired about the fee's cost, and she informed him it was 10 silver coins. His heart sank, realizing 10 silver coins in this world equated to 10,000 in his past life. Though willing to borrow to join, his already dire circumstances and lack of anyone to verify his identity, having fled his village, left him in a bind. To his surprise, Mob tossed him a pouch of coins, offering to cover the fee. Stunned, he stared at Mob as another adventurer warned that the kid might just take the guild tag and flee. Mob countered that this was the whole idea, proposing a wager on whether the boy would strive to repay the 10 silver coins lent to him. The adventurer scoffed, calling it a weak bet, insisting no one would wager on a mere child. Undeterred, Mob doubled down, betting on the boy's potential. The adventurer then staked 15 silver coins that the kid would bolt, 5 that he'd slack off, and 20 that he'd die before repaying. Observing Mob, Tora thought that beneath his gruff demeanor, Mob was undeniably kind. He thanked Mob, who ruffled his hair and gruffly told him not to misread the gesture. The woman whispered that this was a fortunate turn, sharing that Mob, an orphan who rose as an adventurer through hardship, likely saw a reflection of himself in Tora. She urged them to proceed with registration. Introducing herself as Nay, she directed Tora to touch a glowing orb, reminiscent of the crystal from his baptismal rite. Upon contact, a brilliant light erupted, and a sheet inscribed with text materialized. They read his name, Tora, and were astonished to see his skill listed as garbled text. Nay studied it silently, prompting him to ask what the garbled text skill entailed. She explained that skills like lancer or sewing could be honed through dedicated practice in spearmanship or tailoring, unlocking unique abilities. The voice of the world would guide one in mastering these skills. Curious, he asked if she meant the voice of the world, and she confirmed, adding that it was also called the voice of the heavens, guiding all to unlock their potential. He nodded in understanding. He wondered if this voice could be the same one he heard teetering on death's edge, when his past life's memories returned. Excitedly, they noted that with the ambiguous garbled text skill, he'd need to experiment across various disciplines to find his path, urging him to give his all. He vowed he would, expressing heartfelt gratitude. They asked him to wait as Nay approached a device resembling a mystical duplicating machine. He stood there, anticipation building for what lay ahead. As Nay worked, he marveled at the strange, magical technology before him. They lifted the lid, placed the paper inside, and sealed it shut, leaving him awestruck that it truly was a magical copying device. Nay retrieved an item from the other side and handed him a tag, explaining it was proof of his adventurer's guild membership. He expressed his gratitude, gazing at the tag etched with his name. She reminded him to wear it around his neck, which he promptly did, and with enthusiasm, she offered to explain the workings of the Adventurers Guild. She detailed its ranking system, starting at G rank for novices, with tiers progressing from G-, G, G+, F-, and beyond, making him realize the arduous path ahead to ascend those ranks. She added that reaching B rank or higher marked one as elite, with S+ as the pinnacle. However, she warned that any crimes would be etched onto his tag, leading to immediate expulsion from the guild, and he'd be turned over to the guards, no matter how minor the offense. She reassured him that while many adventurers seemed rough, most adhered to the rules and diligently completed quests, so he needn't fret, leading him to muse that despite their gruff exteriors, they were likely decent at heart. Eagerly, he said he wanted to start a quest soon, but she urged him to relax, noting it was lunchtime. And in celebration of his new adventurer status, she'd treat him to a meal, sparking his excitement and gratitude. Moments later, in a cozy tavern, a plate was set before him. He eyed the steaming mushroom soup and rustic Dutch oven bread, his mouth watering and eyes misty with hunger. Dipping the bread into the soup, he took an eager bite, tears streaming down his face as the flavors overwhelmed him with joy. Nay smiled warmly, admitting she'd been curious about him, and asked if he hailed from a wealthy family, given his polite demeanor and refined table manners, though she noted he didn't have to answer if it was too personal. He shared that his family were impoverished farmers, and his mother died soon after his birth. At 6, he fled home when they planned to abandon him in a forest. Nay wondered if it was to lessen the mouths to feed, and he nodded, saying it was something like that. He added that they frequently beat and kicked him, leaving him with no attachment to them. Staring glumly at his bowl, he recalled the grueling journey to the city, where a massive bull monster had attacked him, only for another beast to intervene, tearing into the bull. The sight sent him leaping back in terror and shock. He eventually reached Seiichi, but the city was unforgiving to the weak like him. Scraps of food were fiercely contested, and mere survival was a daily struggle. Thanks to that meal, he savored every drop of leftover soup, knowing it would sustain him for days, as Nay watched with a gentle smile. Later, he approached Nay, who was busy at the desk, and announced, covered in grime, that he'd finished the gutter cleaning quest. His dirt-streaked appearance spoke of his effort, earning her nod of approval. Nay pointed him to a well out back for cleaning up, noting that spare clothes might be oversized but wearable. He thanked her warmly and headed to the well, lowering a bucket to draw water. As he began to hoist it, someone yelled that he reeked. Startled, he dropped the bucket, spilling water everywhere. Glancing up, he saw a man standing nearby. Irritated, he shot back that the man didn't smell any better. The man's face reddened with anger, challenging him to repeat it. Shoving him aside, the man sneered that he looked and smelled like he hadn't bathed in ages, his tattered clothes discolored by grime. Grumbling, the man said he'd heat some water and barked at him to bathe. His anger lingered briefly, but then he recognized the bearded man's underlying kindness. The man filled a large bucket with water, pondering how to warm it. Chanting softly, the man summoned flames from his hand. He dipped his hand into the bucket, making Tora wonder if this was magic. The water bubbled and steamed, astonishing him. The man smacked his head lightly, urging him to get in already. Dipping a finger in, he marveled at the warmth. His first bath in ages. 8 years if counting his past life. The man hoisted him into the bucket with ease. Scrubbing his head briskly, the man ordered him to wash himself, to which he eagerly complied. Minutes later, he emerged, feeling reborn and invigorated. A voice echoed in his mind, declaring that his special skill had activated. Scrubbing off years of filth had unlocked the rare purification spell. The man noticed his pause and asked what happened. Tora explained he'd heard the voice of the world and gained the purification spell. The man mused that the bath must have triggered it, asking if conditions differed per person. He confirmed they did, noting that the same skill could be earned through varied means, influenced by innate talents. For fire-based spells, constant interaction with flames was key, and learning any skill required experimenting with different methods. Still, no one could have predicted such a rare spell would emerge from such an odd condition. Tora's eyes widened, stunned to learn the spell's rarity. As the man handed him a clean shirt to wear, overflowing with gratitude, Tora thanked him, but the man brushed it off, saying he needed a bath himself and told Tora to scram. Later, engrossed in the quest board, Nay called him over, saying the guild's branch chief wished to speak with him. He wondered why someone so important would want to see him. Moments later, he knocked on a door, asking permission to enter, and a voice inside welcomed him. Stepping in, he was stunned to see the bearded man, whom Nay introduced as Leo, the branch chief, amplifying his shock. Bowing deeply, he thanked Leo for his earlier kindness. Leo brushed it off, saying it was no issue and invited him to sit. Leo noted Nay had mentioned Tora's lack of funds and shelter, which Tora confirmed. Leo proposed a deal. A spare guild room with a bed was his to use for now, but he'd need to pitch in with cleaning and aiding Nay and the staff, with compensation for his efforts. Elated, Tora asked if Leo was certain, and Leo said Nay's insistence left him no choice, adding that despite owing mob, Tora was a true adventurer at heart. Leo cautioned him against fleeing without clearing his debt, as it would tarnish his name and the guild's reputation, urging him to uphold an adventurer's honor. Tora agreed enthusiastically. Spotting a head injury, Leo advised him to seek treatment in the medical room with their healing magic and then dismissed him. Tora left, brimming with thanks, while Leo remarked to Nay that, as she and Mob had observed, Tora's eyes still gleamed with determination. Leo added that the garbled tech skill, though flawed, should suffice for Tora's daily needs. In the spare room, Tora stood in awe of his new haven. He dove onto the bed, joyfully shouting that he finally had a bed to call his own again. Overwhelmed with happiness, he bounced on the mattress, savoring the moment. Brimming with joy, he bounced on the bed, vowing to give his all the next day. The following morning, he awoke in a frenzy, realizing he'd overslept. Scrambling up, he rushed to apologize to Nay for his tardiness. She greeted him with a cheerful good morning, urging him to relax since she'd let him sleep in, knowing how exhausting the previous day had been. Waving farewell, he announced he was off to work. Nay replied they were relying on him. He set to scrubbing walls and floors. He noticed the staff seemed swamped with tasks. Offering assistance, one doubted he could read, assuming it was beyond him. Tora assured them he was literate, could write, and knew arithmetic, capable of handling tasks like basic document filing, silently thanking his past life's knowledge. The adventurers gaped, stunned by his claim. One gripped his shoulder, asking if he truly could read, write, and calculate. Tora confirmed, and they eagerly enlisted him. They were incredulous. One admitted she could only read and write her name. Another confessed he couldn't write at all, while a third bragged he could count to 10, though his friend teased he relied on finger counting. Gathering the documents, Tora carried them carefully. Pausing, he realized he hadn't taken any quests that day, leaving his earnings at 0. prompting Nay to frantically remind him about the papers. Days later, he reflected that life at the guild had been non-stop since he arrived. Guild duties consumed his days and nights, leaving no room for rest. By day, he tackled beginner escort quests and grew accustomed to grueling labor. And within just over 2 weeks, he'd earned enough to fully repay Mob's loan. He called out to Mob, who was sitting at the desk. He thanked Mob for lending him money, but Mob brushed it off, saying it was nothing. Mob then loudly declared that anyone who had bet on Toro's failure should pay up now that Toro had returned the money. The adventurers who had made those bets were stunned, and Mob angrily questioned their reactions. After collecting the winnings, Mob told him that his actions had earned them a lot and handed him his share. Touched by Mob's kindness, he became emotional. They gave him his payday and asked why he wasn't using the money for himself. He explained that he had been promoted from G- to G rank, so he might start using some of it. He knew that reaching F- would allow him to take on forest quests, like gathering herbs, or hunting creatures such as one-horned hares. So, he decided to go shopping. He stepped outside the guild, reflecting that shopping in his previous world wasn't exciting, but doing it in this long-dreamed-of fantasy world was thrilling. He spotted a shop and figured it must be the second-hand store Nay had mentioned. He recalled Nay advising him to buy larger sizes since kids grow fast. So he planned to get oversized clothes and a cape for rainy days. His next destination was the weaponry shop. Upon arrival, he was impressed that Nay had such good connections to even know about this place. He remembered Nay mentioning that dwarves ran the shop, though he'd never seen one before. He noted that it was rare to encounter non-humans in town, though he had met some beast folk at the Adventurers Guild. This made him wonder what meeting dwarves for the first time would be like. He entered the shop and called out for the owner. While marveling at the displayed equipment, he realized the shopkeeper was nowhere in sight. A voice from behind told him to browse for now and wait a bit, but after a while no one showed up, so he thought about checking the back. The shopkeeper seemed to be taking their time, and he wondered if they were still occupied. Eventually, the shopkeeper turned around mid-task, suddenly remembering a customer was there. The old man asked if he was a child, and he confirmed it. The old man then asked if his parents had sent him, and again, he said no. He then asked the old man if he wasn't going to temper the sword he was working on, but the old man asked what he meant by that. He admitted he wasn't too knowledgeable, but explained it involved striking hot iron and then cooling it in water to harden it. The old man said it was the first he'd heard of it, though it did sound reasonable, and asked if he meant iron. He mused that instead, he could just control how much force he used. Then, glancing nervously at the sword behind him, the old man pointed to a shelf and told him to pick out a dagger that suited him. The old man decided to give him a dagger for free as thanks for the tempering tip. Surprised, he asked if the old man was serious, but noticed the old man had already gone back to work, clearly eager to try out the idea immediately. So, he accepted the kind gesture and picked out one of the daggers. After grabbing it, he struck a stance, gave the dagger a few swings, and asked the old man for his opinion. The old man didn't respond. He was fully absorbed in his work, making him wonder if he was being completely ignored. He thanked the old man anyway and said goodbye. The old man replied with a casual, "Sure," and he thought to himself that what was supposed to be the highlight of his day hadn't quite turned out as expected. Later, after others saw what he had bought, she told him that it was perfectly fine for someone his age to go for flashier things. He replied that these clothes were far more comfortable than what he'd been wearing before, and convinced himself not to overthink it. She commented that even though his raincoat was a bit defective, something an appraisal could reveal, it wasn't a bad buy given how cheap it was. Curious, he asked what appraised meant, knowing it was one of those otherworld terms he'd probably hear often. She explained that it was one of her skills and she could use it on objects. He asked if she could use it on people, but she told him only part of her ability was unlocked, so she couldn't. Still, she said it was incredibly useful for evaluating items like loot from quests, and it helped her avoid being scammed by merchants. Over time, the skill had evolved and become even more versatile. He then asked what it would take to appraise people, and she replied that certain requirements had to be met, including having a high enough skill rank. She gave an example. If someone had an ace-level appraisal skill, they could appraise anything once the conditions were fulfilled. But at G rank, no matter what they did, people couldn't be appraised. She added that S-rank appraisal could even reveal someone's natural talents. He mentioned that it might help him uncover the truth behind his mysterious, garbled text skill. She agreed it was possible. He told her he had recently learned the Purify skill and asked if the garbled skill could be learned the same way, by meeting specific conditions. She was shocked, saying that Purify was a rare spell usually acquired only by healers. That led her to suggest that maybe the garbled skill was also a healing skill. He asked if that's how it worked. She pointed out that if he had already learned Purify, he might indeed be a healer. But then she paused, recalling something, and asked if he had learned the spell Cleanse as well. When he said no, she was stunned, and he panicked, wondering if that was a bad thing. She explained that Purify was a high-level healing spell, and to acquire it, one normally had to first learn the low-level spell Cleanse, and the mid-level spell Purge before being able to learn Purify. So, the fact that he jumped straight to Purify meant he probably wasn't a regular healer. She began to suspect there might be a unique skill that allowed him to learn Purify directly. She paused to think deeply while he eagerly waited for her answer. But then she apologized, admitting she had never heard of such a skill before, leaving him stunned and even more puzzled about the mystery behind Toro's garbled tech skill. The next day, while he was training with his dagger outside, someone called out to him asking him to come over for a moment. He stopped and asked her what was going on. She told him he had done a great job at work and handed him his wages, which made him cheerful. He had been meaning to buy many things, but knowing he couldn't afford everything at once, he began mentally prioritizing his purchases. Mob noticed how cheerful he looked and asked what he was up to, but he just walked away with a happy grin, which made Mob suspicious, prompting him to shout after him. On his way, he accidentally bumped into someone and quickly apologized. Turns out it was Leo, who asked if he was all right. He replied excitedly that he had just received his second pay of the day, making Mob laugh, while Leo, amused by his excitement, suggested he take the rest of the day off. He gratefully thanked Leo and waved goodbye as he headed out, with Leo watching him leave, smiling at his energy. A few moments later, he stopped walking, realizing he hadn't yet thanked Angus, the dwarf blacksmith. As he made his way to the shop, he noticed people gathered outside, but continued toward Angus's workshop. He knocked on the door and stepped inside, wondering if Angus wasn't there. He moved toward the back, still thinking the shop might be empty despite being open, and called out to ask if Angus was around. Angus responded, asking who it was and whether it was the same boy from before. He confirmed it was him and explained that he came to express his thanks for the dagger Angus gave him. But Angus lifted him up mid-sentence, saying the thanks could wait. Angus then began ranting that while tempering made the metal harder, it also made it more brittle, and asked what he should do about it. He told Angus to calm down because he was squeezing him too tightly. Startled, Angus let go and apologized, explaining that he had been running experiments ever since, and though the weapons were harder, they were also too fragile. That made him inwardly scream that the effort would be pointless at that rate. He advised Angus that to make tempered metal stronger, he needed to incorporate annealing and tempering together. He explained that the two processes work hand in hand. He continued that if Angus struck the iron at a temperature slightly lower than during tempering, it would make the metal tougher and less likely to break. Additionally, he suggested applying a special clay called Akiratsucha during the process, which causes the blade to cool faster and become harder. Angus acknowledged that he understood. He then told Angus that if he followed all these steps, the weapons should turn out well. Angus lit up with excitement and thanked him enthusiastically. He then dramatically said he had seen a flash of brilliance and insisted on calling him Master. But he modestly declined the title, saying he had only shared what he knew. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind, announcing that the condition for activating his special skill, being able to recognize what true experts revere, had been fulfilled. As a result, he had acquired the Eyes of Truth, leaving him stunned and wondering if it was some kind of appraisal ability. Angus told him he'd craft something exceptional using the knowledge he had shared and told him to return in a month to see the results, prompting him to bow in gratitude and thank Angus. He then said his goodbyes and left the shop. A minute later, he was walking through the streets, curiously eyeing the various stores around him. Eager to test his new ability, he activated the Eyes of Truth and was amazed. He could instantly perceive the quality and condition of fruits, items, and armor. However, he noticed that it didn't work on people. Though even so, he knew this new ability was incredibly useful. He picked up an orange and marveled at how even mundane things now looked different to him. He realized he would have easily been tricked into buying bad goods if not for this skill. It only highlighted quality items. A lady selling potions offered him a different one, but he insisted on the one he had already chosen. Then, at a leather shop, the vendor asked for his decision, and he confidently said he'd take the belt. At a bookstore, the clerk seemed surprised he could read, but he knew he had found a bargain and would regret not buying it. People began staring at him, probably because he appeared weighed down by all his purchases, as he carried a box labeled fragile, trying to keep everything balanced. He was satisfied that he had finally gotten everything he wanted, but also a bit disheartened. His money was completely gone. 2 months had passed since he first became an adventurer, yet most still viewed him as the guild's go-to errand boy or handyman, often assigned tasks that were either menial or used as punishment for novices and troublemakers. Despite his efforts, he was still only ranked G+. If he were promoted to F Connor, he would finally receive missions related to the city's defenses, but the guild continued to judge his physical capabilities as insufficient. One day, a man called him out to the courtyard, where several adventurers were busy training. The guild's martial arts instructor, Daz, commented that he looked leaner since their last encounter and told him he could join the training. He nervously eyed his training sword, worried the others disliked him for being unable to train the past 2 months, but Daz encouraged him to show what he was capable of. Without warning, Daz lunged at him, but he quickly dodged, earning praise for his reflexes. He grounded his feet firmly, raised his sword, gripped it tightly, and launched a counterattack. But Daz easily blocked it and told him he was wasting energy with unnecessary movement. Daz then spun his wooden sword and told him to brace himself, as he launched a strike that grazed his cheek. He fell to the ground while Daz reminded him that he had let his guard down. Then, Daz extended a hand to help him up, adding that he had potential. He was also told that mastering the fundamentals of combat would make him strong. But first, his stance needed work, to which he agreed. From then on, his schedule only got busier, especially after taking it upon himself to clean up the guild. He ran errands tied to quests and continued his martial arts training. By the end of each day, he would collapse onto his bed, completely exhausted. He appreciated the progress, but couldn't help but wonder if there was a quicker way. For now, he decided to clean up a bit and call it a night. He used his Purify spell to cleanse himself, but then a realization struck him. If he could use Purify to clean himself, just how powerful was his magic in the first place? He decided to test it out, starting with his own room. Pressing his hand to the floor, he cast Purify to cleanse the space. Within a minute, every inch of the room sparkled with pristine cleanliness. He was surprised to see the walls were originally white, and he still had magic left to spare. So he decided to take it a step further and attempt to purify the entire guild. When he peeked outside and didn't hear anything unusual, he turned to head out. He figured it would be wise to walk around and see if anything had changed. But as he moved, a sudden pain overwhelmed him, and he collapsed to the floor. Someone rushed into his room in alarm. Leo, seeing him, immediately asked if he was the one responsible. But too drained to respond properly, he simply walked away sluggishly. Moments earlier, Leo and the other adventurers had been shocked to witness the entire guild being purified and frantically asked what was going on. He apologized to Leo in a tired voice, admitting he had probably caused the commotion and asking if Leo was all right. Leo scolded him, saying he must have used up all his mana, and called him a fool for wasting Purify on trivial matters. It was meant for cleansing the undead or breaking curses. Hoisting him up, Leo advised him to stick to using cleanse for ordinary cleaning. After laying him down on the bed, Leo told him to rest, though he insisted he still had things to finish. Even so, Leo reminded him that mana would only return once he got some sleep. The next morning, because Purify had taken care of the cleaning, he now had more time to focus on his sword training. Still, the training consisted of repetitive drills, focused on building muscle memory until they could instinctively react in mock battles. He stood out as one of the youngest and smallest trainees, and some of the others had even developed their own unique sword styles. His rise into the adventuring world was clearly an exception. He recalled Ney once telling him that higher ranks aren't handed out lightly. They need to uphold the standards of true adventurers. After all, adventuring was a dangerous profession, and not something to be taken lightly. Raising his wooden sword and bringing it down, he reflected on how fortunate he was. Later, behind Angus's workshop, he called out to him. Angus answered excitedly, saying he had been expecting him. With a cheerful slap on the back, Angus said he had managed to forge weapons like never before, all thanks to him, and he owed him one. Angus held up a finely crafted short sword and proudly declared he had forged it specially for him, then asked if he would accept it. He accepted the sword and thanked Angus sincerely, but Angus waved it off, saying it was a gift, a token of appreciation. Activating his eyes of truth, he saw the sword's value, 15 gold coins. Knowing that 1 gold coin was roughly equivalent to 10, the realization struck him. This sword was worth about 9 phais. Angus, hearing him mutter 150k yen, asked what he meant, but he brushed it off and instead asked if Angus had added anything special to the blade. Angus was surprised he noticed and admitted that sometimes his ability, throw in a bonus, activated unintentionally. He once crafted a sword with just a +1 bonus, and it caused a huge stir. Shaken, he looked at the sword again and saw its attributes, +5 to agility and +2 to skills. He recalled how people had gone wild over a simple +1 enhancement. So what would happen if they found out about his +2 sword? Fast forward 6 months, he reflected on how it had been half a year since the memories of his past life returned. These memories mostly came as retained knowledge, and though subtle, they proved incredibly valuable. It reminded him of isekai tales, where protagonists use modern knowledge to thrive in fantasy worlds. Yet, he had learned it could be a double-edged sword. One day, he anxiously read a newspaper article reporting a vagabond's death due to a monster attack. Overhearing a conversation, someone asked if the deceased was the same vagabond who registered at the commercial guild. His friend replied that it wasn't smart to do so without support. He recalled that the man had tried to file a patent, but a noble had stolen the idea. And the next day, his body was found just outside the town. He realized that introducing advanced technology here might not be as simple or as safe as he originally thought. During training, he noticed one participant overswinging, a dangerous habit. Seizing the moment, the opponent positioned his wooden sword near the participant's neck, exploiting the gap. Toro recognized it as a calculated move, simple but effective, and said so aloud. Inspired, he declared that he'd create something seemingly ordinary, yet practically hard to replicate. Later, following through on that idea, he baked a type of bread he loved in his past life. He knew hygiene standards in this world were poor. People didn't even wash their hands. So, cultivating yeast for baking was a real challenge. But if his plan worked, he could enjoy some soft, fluffy bread once again. He also understood that his purification magic could eliminate only harmful microorganisms, and to his delight, he successfully cultivated yeast. While he was focused in the kitchen, others noticed and began watching curiously. One of them asked what he planned to do with the fruit soaked in sugar water, and he replied that he was making bread. They were surprised and asked if he really meant bread, not dessert. He confirmed with confidence. He then explained that he could turn it into soft white bread, unlike anything she had ever seen. She excitedly asked if it was the luxurious white bread eaten by nobles, then eagerly said that she wanted to try making it too. He smiled and told her they should start by mixing the yeast into the dough. She nodded in understanding. He then explained that the next step was to knead the dough until it became smooth and elastic. After that, they'd need to let it rise for about an hour. Once the dough had risen, they'd shape it. But since there was no oven, they would cook it in a pan instead. A few minutes on the heat, and the bread was ready. He told her that while it wasn't as fluffy as oven-baked bread, it still turned out well. She commented on its light, fruity aroma, and outside the kitchen, Leo and the others caught the scent. Leo rushed in, asking if they had just made bread. He confirmed with a simple yes. Then he added that it was soft, fluffy white bread. Leo took one, examining it curiously. It had a crisp crust but a soft, airy center. Both Leo and the others took a bite and were impressed by how good it tasted. They praised him, saying he was amazing. Not only could he read, write, and do math, but he could also bake delicious bread. He smiled sheepishly, aware that his knowledge came from another world. Next to the Adventurers Guild was a canteen pub, also run by the guild, where adventurers and townsfolk often gathered. When they added the white bread sandwich filled with meat and vegetables to the menu, it became a bestseller within a week. The sandwich even brought in more regular customers. Though the recipe was Toro's idea, it became a CC Guild branch exclusive specialty. In return, Toro enjoyed good food and free shelter from the guild. A win-win situation. While enjoying his bread, he found himself craving rice just as much, though it didn't seem to be a staple in this world. Here, rice was considered little more than livestock feed, like an inferior grain. That revelation nearly brought him to tears, and he cried out in disbelief. Still, he felt it was his mission, as a former Japanese, to introduce the glory of rice. Deep down, he knew it wasn't truly a duty, but his cravings wouldn't let it go, so he brought it up with Leo. But Leo replied that he had never heard of rice. Undeterred, he baked a batch of bread using rice flour and offered it to Leo. Leo picked up a piece, still unfamiliar with rice, and took a bite. The taste surprised him. He remarked that the texture was different, chewier than wheat bread, but it was surprisingly good. Tearing the bread in half, Leo noticed how the halves clung together. He agreed to start selling rice bread, which made Toro exclaim with excitement. Just a few days later, Toro noticed that the rice flour bread had become quite popular. Proudly, he said it was amazing. and realized he should come up with a full meal based on rice next. He considered making something easy to eat in a bowl. With that thought, he began cooking the rice. Since chopsticks weren't used in this world, he planned to make the dish spoon-friendly by dicing up monster meat. Then, he sautéed the meat with a blend of flavorful seasonings. Once the meat was done cooking, he placed it over the rice and finished the dish by drizzling the savory sauce made from the meat juices on top. With that, he had successfully created a simple yet satisfying rice bowl. The dish became another instant hit, and people were amazed that something made with livestock feed could taste that incredible. On another day, he finished crafting a cheesecake-style dish and added a final touch of sauce to the bowl. He picked up a spoon and was just about to take his first bite when a voice rang out, informing him that a skill had activated. It told him the condition for unlocking Food Evangelist had been fulfilled. As a result, he had gained the ability known as plant knowledge. He was puzzled, wondering what the heck that was, thinking it was probably just one of those quirky, borderline useless skills bound to show up eventually. But again, the voice repeated that he had acquired plant knowledge. Yet he didn't feel any different inside. Confused about why nothing seemed to have changed, he decided to inspect the plants in the garden to test the ability. However, as he looked around the garden, nothing happened. His mind remained blank. He figured maybe if he tried appraising the plants, it would work. When he did, a message popped up saying, "Weed, a common grass found growing everywhere." He was shocked. Not because they were weeds, but because the description was unexpectedly strange. With excitement, he took back what he said earlier. It might actually be a useful ability after all. Later at the guild hall, adventurers were gathered and chatting casually. Toro was holding a G-rank cat search quest and told Nay that Gramps wasn't around, asking if he could leave the cat Tabby with her. Nay agreed and reminded him to log it in the ledger to mark the quest as officially completed. He gave Tabby some food, asking her to stay put. Nay commented that it seemed like Tabby spent more time at the guild than at home. Then she asked him if she could borrow his adventurer tag. He took it off, asking curiously why she needed it, and handed it to her. She told him to wait and see, and while playing with Tabby, she attached a small lock to Tabby's neck and told her to stay there for a moment. Then she headed over to the magic printer and told Toro to wait as well. She opened the device and inserted Toro's adventurer tag inside. The magic printer began to hum and glow as it activated. Once it was done, she retrieved the newly printed tag and congratulated Toro on his promotion to F rank. Toro looked at the tag, now showing his name and rank as F-, and excitedly thanked Nay. Nay suggested he take on an F-rank quest now that he'd been promoted, and he eagerly agreed, saying he'd go get ready. He dashed off so quickly that Nay realized he had completely forgotten about updating the ledger. Toro burst into his room, threw on his cap, grabbed his sword, and suited up in his adventurer gear. He then quickly picked up a quest poster with an image of herbs on it, and slapped it down on the counter, declaring with excitement that he'd take that one. Nay was surprised. It was a herb-gathering quest. She told him she had expected him to go for a hunting quest, especially since he had just received a powerful sword from Angus. Toro admitted that was true, but he had other things he wanted to test out. Later, he arrived at the quest location, and something told him he was in the right place. So, he activated his carefully prepared appraisal skill. His eyes landed on a weed, healing grass often used for treating light wounds. Nearby, he noticed a straw mushroom, commonly used in soups, which confirmed his hunch with growing excitement. He set down his large basket, reached for the healer grass, and gently pulled it from the ground. Thanks to his skill, locating and collecting herbs became a swift and efficient task. He went on to gather healer grass, poison grass for detoxifying, and several other medicinal plants until his basket brimmed. It amazed him how much he had collected in just a couple of hours. However, a sudden worry crept in. He might have wandered too far into the depths of the forest. He slung the basket onto his back and began tracing his way back. Just then, he caught the sound of rustling bushes nearby. He cautiously glanced over, only for a goblin to suddenly burst from the undergrowth. He instinctively crouched, trying to hide while wondering what the goblin was doing there. His gaze fell on his sword. If it was only one goblin, a surprise attack might just work, like in the stories. Plus, he'd been eager to see what his sword was capable of. Yet, his hands trembled uncontrollably. Despite the fear, he forced himself to act and rose quickly to launch a surprise strike. But he stepped on a branch, its loud snap jolting him with dread. The goblin heard the sound and swung its axe directly at his hiding place. Luckily, he blocked the blow with his sword and struggled to keep the goblin from advancing, his body still trembling. Then, with brute strength, the goblin knocked his sword away. Without hesitation, he dove to retrieve it as the goblin chased him, axe raised. When the goblin swung again, he dropped to the ground just in time and maneuvered behind it with his sword in hand. But as he reached to draw his blade, panic surged again upon seeing the goblin turn on him. He screamed out, bracing as the goblin attacked with vicious swings. He anxiously anticipated the fatal blow. Then suddenly, his sword glowed brilliantly, releasing a radiant light. The flash distracted the goblin, causing its strike to miss. A system notification flashed, agility +5, leaving him confused but intrigued. When he stepped forward, his body moved with remarkable speed. The goblin stood stunned and frightened as he dashed away like a gust of wind, escaping unscathed. Afterward, he resumed his F-rank herb-gathering quest and devoted his spare time to honing his sword skills. He also began crafting potions guided by knowledge he found in books. Alongside that, he took up blacksmithing lessons under Angus's guidance. Most recently, he had started practicing archery as well. His reason for exploring so many paths was tied to his unique skill, garbled text, which had rare activation requirements. Upon being reincarnated, he regained the full memory of his previous life. After cleansing his body of 2 years' worth of built-up impurities, he unlocked the purification skill. Ordinarily, accumulating so many impurities so quickly was uncommon. Most people didn't bathe that often. He acquired the eyes of truth through his sharp ability to recognize the value of things admired by true experts, something that usually demanded years of experience, wisdom, and charm. Using the knowledge from his previous life, he became highly skilled in food preparation and developed an extensive understanding of plants. Reflecting on it, he realized such remarkable progress couldn't have been achieved so quickly in a normal life. His unyielding nature compelled him to try everything he could, driven by curiosity and necessity. He pushed himself, hoping to trigger the right conditions to unlock more abilities. Mo was startled when an arrow unexpectedly landed in his camp. He inspected it carefully, then nervously called out to the one who had fired it. The person quickly apologized and approached, giving Mo a reassuring pat on the shoulder. He advised Mo to take it easy, knowing full well how Mo had spent his youth chasing the dream of being transported to another world. Though his wish came true, it had manifested through reincarnation instead. One day inside the bustling guild, filled with chatting adventurers, he sighed quietly, recalling how he dabbled in many things for over a year and a half without truly mastering any. He remembered how he had once introduced new items at the inn, which quickly became popular hits. He also recalled teaching Angus how to forge a new weapon called the katana. His first successful monster hunt was taking down a one-horned rabbit, a memorable milestone. He remembered God's warning that things wouldn't be easy, and now he fully understood what that meant. Through all his efforts, he gained valuable experience and discovered his rare knack for handling multiple disciplines with precision, an unusual trait in a world governed by rigid skill systems. In most cases, lacking a specific skill meant being deemed untalented, and mastering something without one was nearly impossible. He began to wonder whether his strange ability, garbled text, had a deeper connection to this. Frustrated, he slammed the table, wondering if he was overanalyzing things. To clear his head, he set off on another herb-gathering mission. This time, he aimed for the forest in the northeast. He realized that constantly foraging in the same area would eventually deplete its resources. He recalled that the deeper into the forest he went, the rarer the herbs became. But so did the danger from lurking monsters. Most of them were goblins, but some areas were even known to harbor orcs. He thought about finishing his gathering quickly for the day, but then his eyes caught sight of a pepper bells plant. He harvested it with care and placed it gently in his basket. Then he stumbled upon another herb and exclaimed with excitement. He had found a manna flower, a rare treasure. Not far from it, he spotted black grass, further reinforcing his luck for the day. As he walked on, he heard something rustling in the undergrowth. He turned, trying to guess whether it was a rabbit or a goblin. Then came a low growl, sending chills down his spine. He instinctively crouched when a goblin stepped out of the bushes, clutching a rat in its hand. He tightened his grip on his sword, confirming it was indeed a goblin. Though his hand shook, he cautiously emerged from the brush, drawing his blade from its sheath. But the goblin, still focused on its meal, simply looked at him, and he stared back in tense silence. Suddenly, without warning, he turned and sprinted away at full speed, leaving both goblin and rat bewildered. As he fled, a voice echoed in his mind, confirming the activation condition of his special skill. The brave man who keeps running from goblins. He was stunned by the revelation. The voice then informed him that he had gained 2 new abilities. presence detection, and a stealth cloak. Still running, he shouted in disbelief, questioning if the system was seriously granting him new skills now. Eventually, he made it back safely to the guild house where adventurers bustled about. He activated his stealth cloak and began to vanish gradually from sight. He examined his hand in amazement, curious about the effectiveness of the ability. He waved at a man named Whisker, trying to see if Whisker could still detect him. Then, to test further, he greeted a woman named Aylward to see if she noticed. He grinned, thinking he had pulled it off, unaware of the hand reaching out toward him from behind. That hand smacked him on the head, and a voice shouted his name. He looked up and saw Leo glaring at him, scolding him to use the skill more responsibly. He laughed awkwardly, realizing some people could still perceive him despite the cloak. Not long after, he was back in the forest gathering herbs. Suddenly, he sensed something approaching. He looked around and nervously wondered if a monster was nearby. Peeking from behind a tree, he sighed in relief. It was just a horned rabbit. He decided to take it down. Its meat was edible, its fur had value, and its horn could be used in alchemy. He activated his stealth cloak and silently crept behind the rabbit. With a quick thrust, he struck it down, killing it instantly. As he bent to retrieve it, he marveled at how effective the stealth skill had proven to be. But once again, he felt an ominous presence drawing near. He swiftly ducked into a bush, uncertain whether it was another monster. Startled, he swung his sword at the approaching figure, only to hear the man yell, asking him to stop and if he was Sadhu. Recognizing the voice, he realized it was a fellow guild member, Yelhi. Yelhi urged him to contact the guild immediately. Yelhi then explained that their party, 5 Arrows, was currently engaged in combat with a massive horde of goblins, around 80 in number. He nodded in understanding and dashed off, shouting for them to hold out until reinforcements arrived. Yelhi replied that they were counting on him. A few minutes later, he burst through the guild doors and urgently informed Leo that 5 Arrows was under attack by 80 goblins. Leo immediately guessed the location to be the northeastern forest and instructed a man to quickly assemble a response team. Once everyone had gathered, Leo announced that 5 Arrows was defending the city of CC from the goblins, and emphasized that they couldn't let their comrades fight alone. They had to give their full support. He reminded them that now was the moment for the Adventurers Guild to stand united. The crowd roared in agreement. Leo then proposed dividing into 3 units: Red Team, Blue Team, and Green Team. He designated him as the leader of the Yellow Team, whose role was to relay information between the groups. He further explained that Roy and the Red Team would rescue 5 Arrows, while the Green Team would encircle and trap the goblins. He ordered him to lead them to 5 Arrows and act as the communication link between all teams. Leo wrapped up by saying that as long as all teams worked together, the mission would be a success, and no one would fall. Everyone responded with an enthusiastic cheer. Back in the forest, Whitaker anxiously asked when backup would arrive, noting he was nearly out of arrows. A teammate reassured him that help was on the way. Just then, while Whisker and the others continued fighting, Roy and the Red Team arrived. Whisker sarcastically commented that they sure took their time. Roy instructed Toro to inform the Blue Team to secure a retreat path. Toro agreed and reminded Roy to bring the potions with them. Roy picked up the potions and asked if they were really okay to use. Toro confirmed with confidence, saying he made them himself and guaranteed their effectiveness. He then activated his stealth cloak and told Roy he'd deliver the message to the Blue Team immediately. He soon reached the Blue Team and asked if they could manage the escape route. One of them replied that it would be easier if the Green Team could draw the goblins' attention. He acknowledged the request and rushed to inform the Green Team. However, a woman there told him they hadn't expected so many enemies and couldn't break through. She asked him to contact HQ for additional support. He returned to HQ and reported to Leo that the situation was critical. There were too many goblins, and they needed backup fast. He also relayed that all teams were currently overwhelmed and requesting assistance. Leo assessed the update and instructed him to return to the guild and inform the rest of the members. After that, Leo told him to get some rest. His part was done, and they could handle the rest from there. Leo and his team then charged into battle, facing a stampede of goblins rushing toward them. He swung his axe with force, severing the heads of the goblins directly ahead. Suddenly, one goblin lunged at him from the side, catching him off guard. Fortunately, Dawes appeared just in time and sliced the goblin to pieces. Leo infused his axe with energy, thanked Dawes, and slammed it into the ground, shattering it and blasting the goblins skyward. Das quickly launched into the air, striking the airborne goblins and assuring Leo that everything was under control. Meanwhile, Mo raised his sword and with a sweeping motion, eliminated a wave of goblins in one powerful slash. Impressed, he shouted that they looked amazing. But then he remembered he needed to get back to the guild. He dashed back, burst through the guild doors, and was immediately bombarded with anxious questions from the adventurers inside. He panted and told them that Leo and the others were en route and everything should be fine. But just to be safe, someone might want to. Before finishing, he collapsed to the floor, prompting everyone to rush to his side in alarm. Later, he suddenly awoke and sat up in shock, relieved to see everyone safe and gathered around him. Roy told him the potions had been a lifesaver and allowed them to fight without fear of injury. He humbly replied that he was just glad everyone was okay. But Roy dismissed his modesty, thanking him sincerely for relaying messages. Because of him, 5 arrows had been saved. Though he had played his part, he still felt uneasy about lacking real combat abilities. He somehow felt more comfortable with swordplay than anything else, but it still wasn't enough. He wanted to test himself against goblins. However, since goblins usually moved in groups, it was too dangerous to face them alone. He figured joining a party would be better, but doubted anyone would accept someone as young as him. He then opened the door to his room, realizing that for now, all he could do was stay true to himself. He lay back on his bed, figuring tomorrow would be another day of training. The following day, an elderly woman entered the guild and warmly greeted everyone. A few days after the goblin incident, he noticed a quest posted on the board and decided to take it. He walked up to Nay to request the quest, but suddenly a man appeared before him, catching him off guard. It was Marco, a guild staff member, who thanked him for his efforts and said he would take care of the quest paperwork. Perplexed, he asked where Nay was and why she wasn't at the guild. Marco leaned in and whispered that Nay's parents had shown up unexpectedly. When he asked why they were whispering, Marco said it had something to do with matchmaking. He commented that it sounded serious, and Marco added that many adventurers were also interested in Nay. Suddenly, a man nearby yelled out, asking if it was really true, startling both of them. The man then shouted to everyone that there was a marriage proposal involving Nay, shocking the entire room. A chorus of disappointed voices followed. One man said he thought he had something special with Nay, while another wept for his beloved. A friend reminded him that Nay wasn't his alone, she belonged to all of them. Some vowed to chase away the potential suitor, and another shouted he'd never forgive that person. The woman at the center stepped in and told them all to settle down. Roy asked Toro if he had heard anything, but Toro replied that he hadn't. Roy and the other men sank into a quiet gloom. Then one man angrily confronted him, asking why he was favored and called him a useless brat. He was bewildered as to why he was being dragged into this mess. Just then, someone placed a hand on his shoulder. It was Roy, telling him to follow Nay for the day and report back with what he saw. He asked Roy why he had to be the one to do it, pointing out that he had already accepted a quest. He turned to Marco for confirmation, but Marco calmly told him that the quest hadn't been processed yet, so he was still free to go. That annoyed him. He silently cursed Marco for slacking off and reluctantly agreed to Roy's request. Before leaving, he told the man who had yelled at him earlier that he would take responsibility if anything happened. The man simply told him to go, adding that they'd be waiting for his report. Roy also wished him luck. A short while later, he was perched on the roof of a building, certain that Nay should be nearby. He soon spotted her and confirmed that he had found his target. Next to her stood a man. He wondered if that was the matchmaking candidate people had been talking about. The man looked impressive, which could spell trouble, but he knew he needed to be sure before jumping to conclusions. He leapt off the roof and landed in a pile of dry grass, startling the nearby bystanders. He peeked over to get a clearer view of them and then stood up, noting that something felt off about how much space there was between them. Suddenly, an old man came over and asked if he was all right after falling from such a height, but he quickly gestured for him to stay quiet. When he turned his gaze back toward Nay and the man, he was shocked. They had vanished. He dashed off, ignoring the old man's calls, consumed with the thought that he had to uncover the truth about those two before it threw the guild into turmoil. In his mind, he imagined the man confessing his love to Nay, and even proposing, which made Nay blush in surprise. He envisioned them falling for each other, prompting him to cry out in frustration. He stressed over how he would break the news to the guild if Nay truly got engaged. Just then, a hand landed on his shoulder and someone asked what he was doing there. Nervously, he blurted out a question to Nay, asking who the man was, but quickly covered his mouth, realizing how suspicious he sounded. Nay, looking puzzled, told him the man had just asked for directions and she was helping him. She added that her parents were visiting and invited him to join them for a meal. Soon after, a warm meal was served, and he found himself sharing a table with Nay and her parents. Unable to help himself, he asked if the matchmaking rumors were true, causing Nay to spit out her coffee in surprise. A few days prior, Nay's mother had arrived at the guild and approached Nay, catching her off guard. They chatted for a bit while Marco quietly listened in, curious if the woman really was Nay's mother and what they were talking about. He overheard Nay's mother suggesting that, if necessary, she could look into matchmaking for a boyfriend. Back in the present, Nay explained that it was all a joke her mother had made. He mentally begged Marco to give him a break. Nay's mother apologized, saying she had only brought it up because Nay hadn't dated anyone. Her father even joked that maybe he could marry Nay when he was older, prompting Nay to tell her dad to stop teasing him. He observed how warm and tight-knit Nay's family was, which made him reflect on his own parents from his past life. A wave of sadness hit him as he thought about how heartbroken they must have been after his unexplained death, especially since he had just been accepted into a prestigious university. All he had ever done was cause them pain. Nay's mother, noticing his somber expression, asked if he was okay, and he replied that he was. He made a silent vow to succeed in this world, to make his parents proud. The next day, he stood there trembling nervously, too afraid to speak. Roy and another man stood beside him, also sweating in fear. The rest of the men were down on their knees before him, while Leo looked at them all silently. Cracking his knuckles in anger, Leo stared at the group as the woman in the middle asked what had happened. Before anyone could respond, Nay heard Marco chuckling and jokingly asking how the matchmaking tale turned out, especially after they'd sent Toro to shadow her. He glanced at the kneeling group and reminded them that they still had quests to complete, urging them to let the matter drop. Leo, however, said that even he had been dragged into their prank, so he had every right to be upset. With anger in his voice, Leo rebuked the men, saying it was disgraceful to involve a child in spying on a guild staff member's private affairs. They tried to defend themselves, arguing that Nay hadn't seemed bothered, so they should be let off the hook. Everyone thought Nay was so kind and angelic, but when Leo gave them a cold smile, their faces turned pale, as they suddenly felt like they were standing before a terrifying lion. Leo told them they were lucky and sentenced them to a month of errand quests. The group was stunned and defeated by this punishment. Errand quests were infamous for being tedious, rough, grimy, and paying little to nothing. This time of year made them even more difficult, involving the repair of the city wall, which included digging up stones, hauling them, and carefully stacking them. The work was exhausting and the pay was meager, which made it one of the most avoided quests. Toro remembered when he was still a G rank. He hadn't been strong enough to handle this kind of labor. They recalled Leo mentioning that this time the rewards wouldn't be so bad due to a bigger budget allocation. Even so, Roy and the rest of the group already looked drained just from seeing the work ahead. Soon, they heard the clinking sound of picks against stone and spotted workers toiling away in the quarry. Oddly, Toro was there too, though he didn't come to haul rocks like the others. He had come believing that his Eyes of the Truth ability might prove helpful. Looking up, he saw an old man ordering them all to start working. But before any labor began, the man insisted on teaching them the fundamentals. He pointed to a boulder and asked if they could clearly see it. He then instructed them to find the center of the rock and strike it directly. The stone cracked cleanly into pieces. He encouraged them to give it a try themselves, surprising them all with how minimal his explanation had been. As they got to work, the old man told them that some stones contained rare materials. If they found anything valuable, they should report it to him. They'd receive a reward if it was worthwhile. Then Toro decided to test something out and activated his Eyes of the Truth ability. Scanning the area, he noticed numerous coal rocks, but one object stood out. It glowed faintly. He approached the glowing stone, curious about its nature, and was about to strike it with his pickaxe when the old man casually told him it was just waste rock and not worth the effort. Regardless, he brought his pickaxe down onto the stone, and a radiant light burst out of it. Everyone nearby watched in astonishment, and when the glow faded, it revealed a shard of mithril ore, classified as S-rank rarity. The old man yelled in shock, ordering everyone to stop working because the stone was actually mithril ore. At that moment, the system notified him that he had fulfilled the condition of uncovering treasure with a single strike, granting him the skill Precision. He exclaimed that he'd only swung the pickaxe once. Days went by, and he still didn't fully grasp the nature of his new ability, Precision. However, he started to understand that Precision applied to tasks like the one he'd just done. Recalling something called precision shooting, he kept striking the center of targets, thinking the skill would prove useful. As the sun set, Marco handed him a pouch with 100 gold coins for the mithril and asked what he planned to do with the money. He replied that he had something in mind, and added that he owed his life in this world to everyone there. He announced that food and drinks were on him that day, earning loud cheers as everyone began to feast and celebrate. Then, spotting Nay, he asked if she had any ideas for how to use the rest of the money. She suggested donating it to the orphanage, like her mother used to do. He was touched by the idea and agreed, mentally telling Mo that he was just as admirable as always. The next day, the old man outside the guild asked if it was true that the guild kid had discovered Mithril, and he confirmed that everyone at the quarry had witnessed it. Inside the guild house, everyone was laughing and teasing Toro. They joked that they'd heard he fought criminals and resurrected an old man. He denied both claims loudly, saying there was no truth to any of it, and questioned what he was supposed to do if such rumors continued to spread. Roy called out and assured him that he'd already denied the rumors on Toro's behalf. Toro, moved by the support, looked at them with teary eyes and thanked them sincerely. He appreciated everyone's help, but realized he still needed to address the rumors himself. Later on, he activated his stealth cloak skill and slipped away quietly. He noticed a crowd gathering nearby and became curious about what was going on. As he got closer, he saw a puppet show and thought the town seemed pretty uneventful. Suddenly, he heard someone call his name and wondered if he was imagining things. The whispers continued, so he edged closer to another group watching a different puppet show. When he reached the stage, he was shocked to see a puppet that looked just like him, boldly declaring it would slay goblins and sell the mithril ore to the local noble, Baron Kak. The puppet then proudly announced that the money would be donated to an orphanage, making Toro tremble as he began to suspect the story was really about him. In this town, puppet shows were a traditional way to pass down local legends and tales. Once sacred rituals, these performances had turned into light-hearted entertainment, now featuring rumors about Toro. He recalled the old saying, "Anyone can start a rumor, but no one can stop one." He realized that these puppet shows would only spread the gossip further. This unwanted spotlight could attract danger, something he was eager to avoid. He slapped himself to snap out of it and regain his calm. Knowing he was out of options, he prepared to take a risky step, resorting to his last available tactic. He watches the puppet show, feeling a mix of sympathy for the performers and firm resolve, knowing he must counter entertainment with more compelling entertainment. Just then, Nay spots him with a puzzled expression and calls out his name. He responds while lifting a hefty stack of wood. She questions why he's carrying so much and points out that he's drawing a lot of attention. He explains that he's planning to make a game for the sake of his future, which only deepens her confusion. She asks what he means by creating a game to survive. He clarifies that the townspeople have become too obsessed with him, so his goal is to develop a game to distract them and shift their focus away from him. She understands his plan to divert their attention, but reminds him that it's no small feat to create something that captures everyone's interest overnight. He confidently tells her not to worry and says he has a secret weapon. With concern, she asks what he means by that, noting his mischievous grin. He assures her that it's nothing illegal, so there's no need for concern. He understands that fantasy tropes are overdone in this world, and that even isekai fans might find them stale. But since he can't explain this out loud, he's left with no choice but to fall back on a tried-and-true classic. He names the game C. First, he crafts a square board and draws an 8x8 grid on it. Then he paints flat circular pieces, black on one side, white on the other. In just a short time, the game is ready. When asked how it works, he explains that the aim is to flip your opponent's pieces by surrounding them with your own. The player with the most pieces at the end wins. Players must place their piece on a square where they can trap the opponent's discs between their own, turning the enclosed discs, whether horizontal, vertical, or diagonal, into their color. He notes that controlling the corners is the key to mastering the game. Nay says she wants to try it right away. He agrees, and they begin. Nay chooses black, and he takes white. She confidently makes the first move, telling him she's not going to lose. At first, Nay has 4 black discs, while he only has 1 white disc in the center. But as the game progresses, the battle intensifies, with the lead shifting back and forth. She makes a move and asks how he likes that, flipping the board to show 12 black pieces versus 18 white ones. He counters, flipping the board again, 24 white and 23 black. The final result is 40 black to 24 white. He wins. She cheers, amazed that she managed to beat the game's creator. He asks for another round and she agrees, to which he declares he won't lose this time. She replies that he clearly doesn't understand her true strength yet. Motivated, he decides to play seriously, and they begin again. Hours pass, and Nay stretches her arms, commenting that for such a simple game, it's surprisingly deep. She then asks if he had been holding back during their first match, and he awkwardly denies it, prompting her to call him a liar. Despite that, she tells him it's a fun game, and she's sure everyone will love it, giving him a boost in confidence. But then it hits him. There's a critical issue. Who will claim credit as the creator and register the game with the commercial guild? Up to this point, the recipes he brought from his past life were simply considered food, so there was never any need to register them. Some tried to copy them, but none could truly recreate the originals. At the guild restaurant, the strong reputation of the Adventurers Guild discouraged blatant imitations, but he knew a game was a different matter entirely. When asked what he planned to do, he admitted that he thought about using the guild's name to stay anonymous. However, the commercial guild would require the actual creator's name for registration. He considered using their local guildmaster, Leo, but hesitated since Leo's notoriety might raise suspicion. He explained that the ideal candidate would be someone trustworthy, not greedy, and backed by enough influence to deflect trouble. Then he asked Nay if she knew anyone like that. She paused, thought for a moment, and then suggested someone quite close to him, leaving him momentarily puzzled. He eventually realized who she was referring to. He guessed correctly that she meant Mob, a dependable man who donates to the orphanage and ranks among the top adventurers in the Sassy Branch Guild. Nay confirmed it, saying Mob always donates part of his earnings and, as a Silver Sword member, would be fine with taking on a long-term mission away from the city. She was sure Mob would happily accept. He agreed, convinced that Mob was the right person for the task and someone he could rely on. After talking it over, he and Mob went to the guildmaster's office. Mob told Leo that supporting the orphanage with his boosted income sounded great, and that he'd been wanting to set his sights higher with his party. Mob asked if he was truly okay with the plan, warning that he might regret it later if the game brought him fame. He answered with confidence, saying it suited him just fine. Earning a cut of the profits while avoiding the spotlight sounded ideal. Mob laughed and agreed, calling it a win-win deal. He then asked Mob if everything was ready. Mob replied affirmatively and reached out to shake hands and finalize the agreement. This was all witnessed by Guildmaster Leo. Shortly after, he completed the preparation phase and figured that basic boards would be good enough for the general public, while he could craft premium versions for collectors and nobles, with fancy finishes similar to shogi boards. He finally realized that his precision ability, which had seemed subtle until now, was going to be a powerful tool. It offered extraordinary accuracy, allowing him to measure things perfectly and hone his hand-eye coordination. He even thought that with this ability, he could become a master carpenter if he wanted. After finishing a luxury version of Reverse, he looked at it, impressed by its beauty and rarity. Its description was wood-carved, and it carried a price tag of 15 gold coins. Nay admired it and said it was a true work of art. He smiled and thanked her for the kind words. Then he turned his gaze to the standard board, knowing that even great products won't sell without proper promotion. He looked over to Roy and the cat girl, gave them a thumbs up to signal it was time to launch their promotional campaign, and they returned the gesture, ready for action. Roy then loudly pretended to discover the game, exclaiming how interesting it looked, which piqued the curiosity of a nearby man, who asked Roy what the game was about. Roy replied that it was a brand new type of game, totally different from anything he'd seen before. The man expresses interest in the game, saying it sounds enjoyable, and asks if he can give it a try. Roy agrees but cautions him, pointing out that the girl ahead of them is surprisingly strong. He jokingly asks the cat girl to take it easy on him, but she confidently refuses. Inside the guild, people begin chatting excitedly about the match on the 8x8 board. To everyone's surprise, the man wins, and the cat girl reacts with exaggerated amazement, praising his skills. Next, he plays against a red-haired man who also lets him win in a playful act. The group gives him a thumbs up, signaling that their covert plan is going smoothly, and he returns the gesture, urging them to maintain the momentum. The use of fake customers draws genuine interest from onlookers, prompting the creation of a special booth to start selling Reverse He right away. In no time, the shop is bustling, with eager customers forming a line that spills outside. He thinks back to Leo's warning about avoiding conflict with the feudal lord by not spreading the game without informing him, and feels relieved, knowing he already sent exclusive versions as gifts. As he strolls through the area, he notes that he also granted distribution rights to merchants associated with the Adventurers Guild. In a place like Sassy, where entertainment is scarce, the trendy and easy-to-learn game rapidly gains popularity among the youth, becoming a hit across all age groups. A sudden burst of noise catches his attention, sparking his curiosity and prompting him to excuse himself and check it out. To his surprise, he sees elderly players fully engaged in playing the game with ease. An old man makes a move that excites the crowd, with TI holding the center of the board. But then his opponent, Bjorn, pulls off an unexpected comeback, thrilling the spectators even more. He realizes the public's enthusiasm has surpassed his expectations, and the reverse he campaign is proving to be a major hit. The following day, the man excitedly tells Mob that both the affordable and premium versions of reverse he are selling rapidly. Mob is pleased but reminds him that the guild is handling all commercial aspects, so he should coordinate with them. The man agrees, understanding the arrangement. Mob watches as the man walks off in high spirits, then turns to Toro and asks if he's heard the update. Toro confirms, adding that he's already discussed boosting production with the guild leader. Mob acknowledges this and shares his hopes of eventually competing in the major cities with his team, adding that he owes Toro a favor. Toro responds by saying the feeling is mutual, and the two bump arms in a gesture of camaraderie and mutual respect. Half a month later, Silver Sword completes all the high-level quests in CC and earns a promotion to B rank. With a recommendation letter from Branch Guild Master Leo in hand, they head toward a larger city. Meanwhile, he is called into Leo's office, where Leo silently stares at him, creating an uncomfortable tension. He notices Leo's stern expression and feels anxious, swallowing hard. When Leo says something under his breath, he misses it and nervously asks him to repeat it. Leo slams his hand on the table, startling him slightly. With frustration, Leo says it's good that adventurers from other regions are visiting, but their unruly behavior is upsetting the townspeople and damaging the guild's reputation. The current top adventurers are the C-rank 5 Arrows and the quickly formed Team Your Protectors, but they still fall short compared to Mob's Silver Sword. Toro has been quietly enduring Leo's complaints, even though the meeting was originally meant to discuss expanding the production network for Reverse He. Leo, visibly frustrated, shifts the conversation, saying that internal security has been deteriorating. He's asked the feudal lord for reinforcements, but hasn't had much luck. Instead, troops are being diverted to deal with bandits and rising crime in other areas. Toro remains silent, mentally noting how Leo seems to have an endless list of grievances. Finally, Leo takes a deep breath to compose himself, and acknowledges that while challenges persist, revenue from the relaxing inn remains steady, with commissions from Reverse He sales helping keep the guild afloat. Toro feels some relief that they're finally circling back to the actual topic of the meeting. But then Leo shares unexpected news. A sizable order has come in from the capital. The merchants say the buyers there also want Toro himself, along with the limited edition boards. Toro is taken aback by the request for 10 deluxe reverse He boards, impressed but not entirely surprised given the capital's elevated standards. The surprise deepens when Leo adds that Toro is expected to personally travel with the merchant caravan. Toro is stunned by the prospect. Leo elaborates that the capital wants Toro to stay for a full month as the official Reverse He constructor. Toro protests, saying it's unnecessary since the game is simple to learn, and reminds Leo that he's still just a kid. Leo firmly replies that if it's a formal request, they have no choice but to comply. He adds that while Toro might not enjoy the spotlight, no one in the capital knows him yet, and it might do him good to see the wider world while he's still young. Toro exhales in resignation, accepting the situation. Then Leo drops another surprise. Toro is being promoted to E rank, effective immediately. Toro is shocked and asks why the sudden decision. Leo stands and explains that the E rank adventurers from other regions are less capable, so promoting Toro helps maintain the guild's credibility. He also reassures Toro that the promotion will benefit him in the long run, even if he doesn't enjoy the recognition. Still feeling conflicted, Toro reluctantly agrees. Leo then says the preparations are now Toro's responsibility until departure, and Toro silently accepts the task. Later, Toro is in the forest gathering poison grass, while the sun dips below the horizon. Back in the workshop, he's carefully crafting the limited edition Reverse He boards. He focuses intently, thinking that with enough care, even the most delicate work becomes manageable. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild late at night, the red-haired man and Roy are locked in a tense match of Reverse He, clearly struggling with the rules. Frustrated after another loss, Roy flips the board in irritation. Elsewhere, Toro is quietly assisting Nature with paperwork at a nearby table. A group of adventurers from another town notice him handing over documents and snidely comment, questioning why a child is working at the guild, calling it an embarrassment. They continue mocking him, saying he looked too professional reviewing quests, and wonder aloud when the guild started taking in kids. One of them mocks country folk, saying Toro wouldn't understand the city's ways. Toro observes their guild badges and quickly realizes these are likely the unruly adventurers Leo had warned him about. Their mocking tone angers the local adventurers from Sassy, who bristle at the disrespect toward Toro. One of the visiting adventurers, an elf with long ears, jeers that having a kid like Toro in the guild only invites ridicule. But before things escalate further, someone interrupts, shouting at the elf in defiance. It's Roy, the C-rank adventurer from As Your Protectors, and Toro's team leader, who can no longer tolerate the insults. Roy stepped forward, confronting the men, and pointed out that the kid they were mocking, Toro, was a full-fledged adventurer and held the same E rank as them. The other members of CC voiced their agreement, backing Roy's statement. The long-eared man scoffed, sarcastically questioning if Roy truly believed that Toro was an adventurer of equal rank, calling it absurd coming even from a C-ranker. Roy stood firm, explaining that unlike their region, CC trained adventurers with higher standards, thanks to a former A-rank guildmaster and martial arts expert. Even kids here surpassed adventurers from elsewhere. CC's members circled the two outsiders, chuckling and telling Roy he didn't need to say so much, before reassuring the visitors that CC folks meant no harm. Intimidated, the two men quickly apologized and rushed out of the guild. Toro was stunned to learn that both Leo and Daz had once been A-rank adventurers. Roy called out to check on him, while the cat girl encouraged him not to let the incident get to him, and Whisker reassured him that he was doing just fine. Toro thanked them sincerely and told them he wasn't bothered by the insults, which brought a wave of relief over the group. He felt a swell of emotion, realizing how much these bonds meant to him. This is exactly why he came here, and he was deeply grateful. The following day, the adventurers from the other town fled from CC in panic, and a man appeared at the entrance of the Adventurers Guild. Inside, Toro was focused on the quest board, chatting with another adventurer. As the man walked in and approached, also in conversation, noticed the man heading straight toward Toro, puzzled by the sudden approach. The man stopped only when he stood directly behind Toro. He then shouted, demanding to know what Toro was doing there. It was Toro's father, and he barked at him to answer. When Toro said nothing, the man swung a punch at him. Toro reacted instantly, boosting his agility, and dodged the punch with ease, stunning his father. Shocked, his father growled, asking who told him he could dodge. Toro stayed quiet. Enraged, his father lunged again to grab him. Toro dropped low to avoid the grasp, and moved swiftly to the side, causing his father to stumble over his own feet and fall clumsily to the ground. Nay burst out from the reception desk, yelling at the man and demanding to know what he was doing. The red-haired man reminded him that violence was forbidden inside the guild, while the cat girl tried to help him up and de-escalate the situation. But Toro's father shoved her aside and grabbed Toro's wrist. He angrily demanded to know where Toro was staying and ordered him to pack up. They were going home. Toro shook his hand free and calmly but firmly stated he wasn't going back. In response, his father swung another punch, shouting at him for being disrespectful. But Toro vanished from view and reappeared behind him, his own fist clenched and ready. He thought bitterly that the man hadn't changed at all, and for a moment he wanted to strike back. But he caught himself, remembering the guild's rules against violence. Instead, he told his father they should take the conversation outside so as not to disrupt the others. As the two of them left, the adventurers exchanged concerned glances, hoping Toro would be okay. Back at the inn, his father angrily demands to know where the money from the mithril sale is, claiming that everything Toro owns belongs to him. He insists that Toro hand over all the money he's earned. Toro realizes, just as he feared, that rumors of the sale reached their village. And now, after ignoring him for so long, his father has suddenly decided to act like a parent. He calmly tells his father that he has no money to give, which enrages the man. His father lunges to grab him again, shouting that he's an ungrateful brat. But Toro effortlessly brushes the hand away, wondering how long it will take for his father to understand it's pointless. Fuming, his father accuses him of forgetting everything his parents did for him. Toro fires back, asking what exactly his father did. His only memories are of daily beatings. His father claims those were lessons in discipline, but Toro shoots back with a sarcastic, "Right." At that tense moment, two unfamiliar men appear and ask his father if he's collected the money from his son yet. One of them turns to Toro and asks if he's the Toro. Toro confirms that he is. The man tells Toro that his father owes them money, and if he doesn't pay, they'll be in serious trouble. It clicks for Toro. They expect him to pay off his father's debts. His father, now trembling, quickly promises to pay right away. Toro asks the men if they have a loan agreement. They grin and confidently say they do. One of them pulls out a piece of paper and shows it to Toro. Toro reads it and coolly points out that it's not a loan agreement at all. The man is stunned and yells, asking if Toro can even read. Toro calmly explains that the paper is just a note from their boss telling them to act friendly, find out how much he has, and then squeeze him dry. Toro firmly tells them that without a real loan contract, he won't pay. And even if there were one, he no longer considers the man behind him his father, so he still wouldn't pay. His father panics and shouts that Toro is lying. But suddenly, a butcher knife slams down right in front of him. It's the innkeeper. He steps in and tells Toro's father that this behavior is unacceptable in front of other guests. He warns him, if he keeps bothering Toro, the entire town will turn against him. If he values his life, he should back off. Other adventurers in the inn agree, shouting that Toro has always been generous. He even donated all his remaining earnings to the orphanages, a well-known act of kindness. They surround the two men and Toro's father, who start to panic as the innkeeper glares at them, clearly aware that he's no ordinary man but a former adventurer. Fearful, Toro's father bolts from the inn, leaving the two thugs stunned. Just as they prepare to chase him, Toro asks them to wait a moment. One of the men, still tense, barks that if he isn't paying, he should stay out of it. Toro replies that even though he's cut ties with his father, he apologizes for the trouble the man caused them. He tosses a coin to them and says it's for their trouble. No need for a receipt. One of them catches it and is shocked to find it's a gold coin. Realizing that their debtor is escaping, the two men scramble out of the inn in pursuit. Toro turns back to the innkeepers and sincerely apologizes for the commotion. The innkeeper reassures him it's all right. They continue talking, unaware that someone nearby is eavesdropping on their conversation. Later, Toro is back in the forest, harvesting plants, when the man from the inn suddenly appears behind him. Sensing the presence, Toro sighs in frustration, wondering why all the bad things seem to happen at once. He turns to face the man and exhales slowly to calm himself. Then, he prepares for what's coming by positioning himself defensively. A few minutes earlier, he had spotted the man hiding behind a tree, eyeing the sword on his waist, the one crafted by Angus and worth 15 gold coins. The man had been shocked, clearly recognizing the craftsmanship and unable to believe it was truly Angus's work. He then stepped out and ordered Toro to hand over the sword. But Toro, tired of the nonsense, sighed and placed a hand on the ground, activating his aura. Sensing that some local adventurers were nearby, he made a quick escape, calling out over his shoulder that they'd meet again. After reaching a better location, he stopped running and faced the man who was still pursuing him. The man shouted that Toro wasn't worthy of carrying such a sword and demanded he drop it and leave. Instead, Toro shouted for help, claiming someone was trying to steal his sword. The nearby adventurers heard his voice and, recognizing it, became concerned and rushed toward the commotion. As they approached, they asked what was going on. Toro smiled to himself. His trap had been set, and his witnesses had arrived. When the man raised a crossbow to shoot, Toro activated his stealth cloak and boosted his agility fivefold, dodging the bolt with ease. He then landed a clean punch to the man's face, knowing the witnesses would see it as clear self-defense. The man passed out just as the adventurers arrived, surrounding Toro and asking if he was all right. Toro felt a wave of relief. He could finally go back to his quest. Later, at the CC Adventurers Guild, Toro examined a stack of high-quality lumber and wondered if he should finish the rest of the limited edition reversible boards. He began carving, activating his precision skill to craft each piece with meticulous detail. Hours passed as he silently focused on his work. When he finally finished 10 boards, he stretched his stiff shoulders and admired his masterpieces with pride. Despite the ache in his body, he was excited. He realized that even with the help of the precision skill, making so many boards in such a short time was extremely demanding. The skill let him recreate intricate handiwork with perfect accuracy, but he also understood that without creativity and talent, good craftsmanship meant nothing. It made him grateful for the effort he'd put into art classes in the past. The next day, Toro was playing Reversi with the red-haired man when someone asked how things were going and whether he thought he could finish in time. He looked up to see Paolo, the merchant of safety, who asked how many boards he had completed. Toro proudly replied that he had finished all 10. Paolo's eyes widened in shock, impressed. He admitted that he had only hoped for 6, as per their agreement. With respect, Paolo shook Toro's hand and asked again. Was he sure he didn't want to retire from adventuring and instead pursue mastery of his craft? Before Toro could reply, someone smacked Paolo on the back of his bald head and scolded him for trying to poach one of their rising stars. Paolo rubbed his head and grinned, replying that with Toro's skill, he could make far more money than he did as an adventurer. Leo retorts that if Toro leaves, he'll stop doing business with Paolo's trading company. Paolo laughs nervously and apologizes, insisting that he was only joking. Leo gives him a dry look and says that's the most unbelievable excuse he's heard all day. But then both of them burst into laughter. Toro takes the chance to ask Leo if there's any update on the trip to the capital. Leo replies with a question of his own. Has Toro's 2D partner been decided yet? Paolo cuts in, explaining that it seems the person is a noble. He advises Toro to get some new clothes while he still has time, offering to introduce him to a good tailor. Toro frowns and asks what they mean by new clothes, wondering if this situation is starting to spiral into something much bigger than he expected, and whether it's even okay for him to be involved. A few days pass, and the day of departure finally arrives. Leo advises him to leave early. Night travel is risky, with monsters and even bandits rumored to be out. He also asks why Toro isn't wearing the fancy new clothes he got. Just then, they appear beside him and ask why he didn't tell them about the new clothes. They had wanted to see them. Toro replies that those are formal clothes meant for meeting nobles, not something practical for traveling. They begin loading their belongings into the carriage. Once everything is packed, Toro waves goodbye and says he's heading out. They wave back and wish him a safe journey. The group sets out, and to Toro's surprise, this is the first trip he's taken that goes completely smoothly, thanks largely to the safety of the highway. He notices heavy traffic and guards stationed at every rest stop, making the route feel especially secure. Still, a familiar fantasy scenario plays in his mind, where a merchant convoy is suddenly ambushed mid-journey. He quickly dismisses the thought as unnecessary paranoia, especially since he's traveling with Mina, a capable solo adventurer and veteran of shipwreck survival. Toro alerts Mina that a man up ahead looks suspicious, like he's analyzing their group. She glances out and suggests he could be a bandit scout using an appraisal skill. Either way, they both agree they can't let their guard down. Mina asks how their convoy would appear from an outsider's point of view. Toro replies, "It looks like 3 fully loaded carriages, 10 guards, 3 coachmen, 3 passengers, including Paolo, and a child. For bandits to hit a group of 17, they'd need similar numbers. On a highway, that kind of risk might not be worth it." A while later, while they're eating at a rest stop, a loud noise erupts from outside, startling them both. Toro asks what that was, and Mina says she has a bad feeling. Toro wonders if the bandits chose to target the convoy behind theirs instead. Moments later, soldiers return with grim news. By the time they reach the scene, the bandits had already vanished, and the convoy was completely destroyed. Their hope that the roads were safe is shattered. Toro reflects bitterly that reality is far more brutal than he imagined. As they continue, their horse stops, waiting for the carriage in front to move forward. Farmers working nearby notice the procession and stare. Mina suddenly leans out and calls excitedly to Toro. The capital is in sight. He opens the curtain of the carriage and gasps. The city wall stretches on endlessly, far surpassing anything he's seen before. Paolo remarks that once they get closer, the sheer height will be even more impressive. Not long after, they arrive at the capital gate, and their jaws drop at the towering entrance. Toro feels a wave of nervousness hit him. Mina walks up to him, gently pushes his jaw shut and laughs, teasing him about how wide his mouth was hanging open. They continue forward as the massive gate creaks open before them. Inside the city, they are dazzled by the sight of elegant citizens strolling the streets. Toro is struck by how different everything feels, like stepping into another world filled with races he's never seen before. Paolo tells him that they're heading straight to the merchant headquarters and invites Toro to come along. He agrees without much thought, then forgets and simply sits beside Paolo in the carriage as they roll off toward the headquarters. Upon arrival, Whisker informs Paolo that they'll report the mission's completion and the bandit incident to the Adventurers Guild, just in case. Paolo agrees and tells Whisker to gather at the guild in the morning, 5 days from now. Paolo turns to Toro and Mina, asking what they plan to do next. Toro replies that he'll stay with Paolo's group, and Mina says she's still acting as his bodyguard, so she'll stay as well. Toro waves goodbye to the other adventurers, noticing how comfortable the 5 Arrows team seems in the capital. Mina explains that they've done missions like this many times, and so has she. Toro asks if getting used to it just comes with experience. She nods, saying it was only difficult at first, and offers a tip. If he ever gets lost, he can use the Imperial Castle's tower as a landmark. He remarks that she sounds like she's done that before, and she confirms it. She confesses that she once wandered around the city for half a day trying to find the Adventurers Guild headquarters, before finally spotting the tower. Toro says he understands, but silently wonders if she's serious, joking, or just naturally airheaded. A short while later, they arrive at the hotel. Toro is stunned. This is the first truly luxurious place he's ever stayed in. He tells Mina how fancy the place looks and asks if everyone's staying here. Mina shakes her head and says it's just for him. Her usual lodgings cost a fifth of this, which shocks him. He asks if that means this place is 5 times more expensive. She replies that since he's acting as a noble's reverse, he tutor. Staying in a respectable place is important. It's all about maintaining appearances. Toro nods, finally understanding that it's about reputation. Mina agrees. He admits that he's starting to feel nervous. Mina reminds him that if he lets nerves take over, he won't last the month. He quietly reassures himself it's just 1 month. He wishes he could return with everyone after 5 days. Mina gives him a warm smile and says there's no room for whining. He responds respectfully, "Yes, ma'am." They wave goodbye, and she advises him to take a bath and get some proper rest. Taking her advice to heart, he indulges in a relaxing, warm bath. The next morning, he greets Mina with a cheerful "Good morning." She returns the greeting with 2 massive dark circles under her eyes. He asks if she's not a morning person. She says she is, but still feels cranky when she wakes up. Toro decides it's probably best not to push the topic. They both sit down and begin eating their sandwiches, chewing them with visible disappointment. Toro asks if she finds the white bread hard to chew. Mina replies that this is the relaxing inn, and even their white bread is considered a luxury. At that moment, Toro realizes he's become a little too accustomed to the rich foods he once invented. With a sigh, he murmurs that he really wants to eat ginger pork. Mina starts imagining the taste and groans, telling Toro to stop talking about ginger pork. He's making her crave it. As a regular at the relaxing inn, Mina has developed a refined palate of her own. They soon arrive at a new location, and Toro is once again amazed. Mina explains that they've reached the fish traders' meeting, though it's just one of several stops ahead. The trade representative, Darvish, a cheerful 45-year-old man, greets them with a hearty laugh. He says that the moment he received the reversing board Paulo had sent via Fast Horse, he instantly knew reverse. He would be a hit. Darvish then proudly introduces his children, saying even they are big fans of reverse he. He adds that he's been promoting the game to nobles he has connections with, and sure enough, it's become a sensation in the capital. Toro replies that it's gratifying to hear, and that his teacher, Moab, would surely be overjoyed. Toro reminds himself that his role is simply to be Moab's apprentice. Nothing more, nothing less, and he mustn't make any mistakes. Darvish praises him further, saying that beyond being an apprentice, Toro clearly has the talent to create works of art, like the limited edition boards, and he's amazed by how skilled and young he is. Toro awkwardly smiles and quietly asks Darvish to keep it a secret that he was the one who made them. Darvish nods in understanding and agrees, saying that if word got out, nobles would flock to him in droves. He's only been telling people the boards were made by a CC craftsman and will continue to do so. However, he slyly requests a limited edition board as a form of hush money. Toro agrees, knowing that Darvish sees it as a reasonable exchange for his silence. The next day, they travel into the first-class residential district for nobility. Looking out at the massive mansions, Toro nervously tells Paulo that everything looks so different it's frightening. Some of the houses are as large as castles. Paulo, sweating nervously, tries to reassure him, but admits it's also his first time there. This only heightens Toro's anxiety. He glances at Mina, who exudes calmness. Her steady presence reassures him. She says that as a bodyguard, she has to stay calm no matter what, but adds with a smirk that if she were in his shoes, she'd be soiling her pants. Toro is stunned, unsure if they expect him not to panic, especially after a comment like that. But Paulo and Mina both burst into laughter at his reaction, which helps break the tension. Their carriage pulls up to the grandest, most extravagant mansion they've seen yet. Toro wonders who in the world could live in a place like that. He guesses it must belong to a noble of the highest rank, even among nobles. Garfield then informs them that this isn't Count Plano's residence, as originally scheduled, but the home of Duke Valia, the kingdom's prime minister. Toro is stunned to his core. He knows that Duke Valia is second in power only to the king himself. In that moment, Toro realizes he's about to meet someone extremely important. Inside, A well-dressed butler greets them and announces that all the guests have arrived. The butler then opens a grand door and tells them to proceed. As they enter, Toro instinctively activates his presence detection ability, noting that the room is filled with many people. They're brought to a halt by the butler, who asks them to wait in front of the door. They nervously comply. Suddenly, a voice from within the room introduces Darvish as the representative of the Garfield traders, and Toro as the reverse he tutor, along with his entourage. The formal announcement stuns Toro, making him wonder why they're being introduced with such ceremony. All of a sudden, a voice echoes in his mind, informing him that his unique ability has triggered. The requirement of being observed by over 10 people simultaneously has been fulfilled, granting him appraisal inhibition. This unexpected development leaves him puzzled, questioning why it's happening now. He's taken aback when the door swings open, revealing a chamber packed with distinguished nobles who appear to be evaluating him. It dawns on him that receiving appraisal inhibition confirms he's currently under scrutiny. In response, he activates his skill to obscure his stats from the room. The nobles exchange uncertain glances, leading him to wonder if the concealment worked. At that moment, someone greets a figure named Gar-Fish, briefly diverting the noble's attention. Duke Valeria steps forward and addresses him directly. The Duke expresses astonishment at how young the tutor appears, despite already knowing he was just a child. As they walk closer together, Duke Valeria guides him to a table where a rare edition of Reverse is set up. The Duke formally introduces Toro to the assembly as the leading apprentice of Reverse's creator and their instructor for the day. He encourages applause and announces plans to play 3 matches as a demonstration. Toro is caught off guard, suspecting the Duke might be assessing his skills, and wonders if this tactic is somewhat childish. He realizes that from the Prime Minister's viewpoint, the Duke's choice to hire a child might come across as mockery. Toro replies respectfully, assuring the Duke he understands and is ready to give his best. Once the Duke is seated, Toro takes his place opposite him at the table. The nobles murmur quietly, noting how refined Toro seems despite being from a humble background. Meanwhile, Darvish and Paolo look increasingly anxious. Mina reflects on whether Toro can both impress the Prime Minister and earn his favor during the match. Everyone falls silent, anticipation building as the game is about to commence. Toro courteously invites the Duke to make the opening move. In the first match, the Duke plays black and Toro plays white. The Duke initially pulls ahead with a 2-move lead, soon flashing a confident grin as he lines up 9 tiles. A nobleman remarks with disappointment that Toro doesn't seem impressive, but a noblewoman counters, saying the Prime Minister is simply too formidable, having bested them all over the past few days. Soon after, the Duke hesitates with 15 tiles on his side, while Toro steadily increases to 6. After careful strategy, Toro overturns the momentum, reaching 22 tiles to the Duke's sum. As time progresses, Toro gains further advantage, now holding 29 tiles while the Duke is down to Ia. The noblewoman praises Toro's comeback, while the nobleman acknowledges the Duke's aggressive early game as equally commendable. The first match concludes with Toro as the victor. Duke Valeria commends him, saying such performance is fitting for the top disciple of Reverse's inventor. He adds that it's no surprise the king selected Toro as tutor, to which Toro responds humbly, expressing his gratitude. The Duke proposes they restart for the second round, and Toro agrees without hesitation. Early into the next game, the Duke takes the lead again, gaining 10 tiles to Toro's 5. However, momentum shifts once more. Toro rallies and secures 35 tiles while the Duke falls behind with. After the second match concluded, Toro once again triumphed, this time claiming 48 tiles to the Duke's. The nobles were taken aback and began to question whether the initial match had been orchestrated. The Duke, clearly feeling the pressure, suggested starting a third match to settle things further. As the game commenced, Toro took the opening move and swiftly gained an advantage, securing 23 white tiles compared to the Duke's 10. Yet, the Duke made a remarkable comeback, reversing the situation to claim 35 tiles, leaving Toro with. When the match concluded, the outcome was a balanced draw, 32 tiles apiece. Toro expressed his gratitude to Duke Valeria for the match, and the nobles applauded, making Toro question whether he was perhaps taking the game too seriously. A moment later, he addressed the nobles, explaining that while corner control is beneficial, it doesn't ensure victory. He reminded them that Reverse is meant to be enjoyed, and the true goal is to have fun. Garfield then approached Toro, admitting that while he hadn't said it earlier, he thought Toro's performance was incredible. Darvish observed that Toro had consistently given up early momentum only to turn the games around in the final moments, even allowing the Prime Minister to reach a draw in the last game. Pablo nodded emphatically in agreement. Toro modestly responded, saying they were giving him too much credit. He pointed out that the Prime Minister had clearly adapted by the third match, which led to the draw, and he wasn't certain what would happen if they played again. Duke Valier appeared behind him, calling his name. Toro turned and apologized for not noticing him sooner. The Duke also offered his own apology for having tested him. He then remarked that because reverse is such a straightforward game, it tends to reveal a person's true nature, something he found deeply intriguing. Though he hadn't played long, the Duke admitted that his overconfidence had clouded his judgment, and seeing Toro's skill had humbled him. Toro shook his hand warmly, commending the Duke for his resilience and adaptability, especially in the final game. He added that if they were to face off again, he wasn't confident he'd win, prompting a hearty laugh from Duke Valier, who thanked him sincerely. Shifting the subject, Duke Valier explained that the real reason he had Toro substitute for Count Delano at the last moment was to evaluate him on someone else's behalf. Toro, confused, asked what he meant by evaluation, wondering if this had anything to do with the odd sensation he'd felt upon entering. The Duke clarified that he possesses an S-rank appraisal skill and has a keen sense for evaluating people. However, in Toro's case, his ability had only briefly picked up on something before it vanished, causing Toro to appear completely average. It was the first time such a thing had happened, and it left the Duke genuinely surprised. Toro realized that his newly acquired ability didn't just block appraisals, it also generated misleading data. The Duke then asked if Toro would be willing to temporarily lift the barrier, as he wanted to introduce him to someone who needed to be able to trust him entirely. Toro understood that the Duke had seen through the facade and wondered if this might be a chance to better understand his own jumbled skill set. He agreed, saying he would disclose his abilities, but only in private and only to the Duke. The two entered a secluded room, and Toro felt a bit anxious under the Duke's focused gaze. He quickly scanned the area to ensure they were alone. Then, he deactivated the appraisal inhibition, revealing his true stats, which left the Duke visibly stunned. Duke Valier commented on the peculiarity of Toro's profile. While his base stats were normal for someone his age, they were greatly enhanced by an unusual ability called precision. Looking over Toro's stats, 24 health, 75 mana, 15 strength, 90 intelligence, 12 constitution, and an astonishing 250 dexterity, he was even more intrigued by the long list of unique skills, which included memory retrieval, Eyes of Truth, and others. The Duke admitted he'd never heard of the Eyes of Truth, but was fascinated by how it integrated with Toro's appraisal and detection skills. Toro feels completely vulnerable as his abilities are laid bare, and he trembles with unease. But Duke Valeria shifts the focus, noting with curiosity that despite Toro possessing the garbled tech skill, he's managed to advance in multiple disciplines. He explains that typically, growth in professional skills would be reflected in corresponding stat improvements, but that correlation seems absent in Toro's case, which he finds baffling. Toro, however, is quietly reassured. Knowing his professional growth is real, affirms that all his hard work hasn't been wasted. He's tempted to ask for more insight, but holds himself back out of respect, aware of the Duke's status as Prime Minister. Duke Valeria goes on to say that although he has previously encountered garbled tech skills, Toro's remains indecipherable. When Toro presses for clarification, the Duke reveals that his skill requires at least an S-rank appraisal to identify. Normally, patterns in stats and ability trends offer hints, but Toro's growth across so many fields defies all precedent. This reminds Toro of something Ney had mentioned before, reinforcing the mystery surrounding his skill. The Duke adds that if Toro had simply improved in combat-related roles like Holy Knight or Hero, it would make sense. Yet, Toro has gained mastery in unrelated areas like blacksmithing, woodworking, and alchemy, something far beyond typical patterns. Duke Valeria admits he's never encountered such an unpredictable skill progression in his entire career. Toro is stunned that even the capital's foremost appraiser can't decipher his abilities. Still, he manages a smile, reminding himself that what matters is his continued growth across a range of skills. He reflects that perhaps his mysterious gift is a blessing from the gods, an exceptional skill with steep conditions for unlocking, but still worth pursuing with effort and patience. Duke Valeria, now clearly intrigued, assures Toro that his ability seems rare but harmless, and there's no cause for concern. Then, circling back to the initial reason for the evaluation, the Duke discloses that the prince personally requested Toro as a tutor. He'll be expected to instruct His Highness once a week, while also teaching nobles and commoners on other days. Toro is speechless as he processes the revelation that the prince, actual royalty, was being referred to. The realization leaves him reeling, as he wonders if reverse is becoming a favorite pastime of the elite rather than just common entertainment. Duke Valier reassures him that he'll be fairly compensated, but Toro knows money isn't the real issue. It's the weight of what's being asked. Later, as they leave the mansion, Toro feels drained while Mina radiates joy. Watching her cheerful demeanor, he notices how effortlessly she fits in, while he feels like he disappears into the background among nobility. She compliments him on a job well done, and he thanks her sincerely. Then, she teasingly asks if the rumor about him tutoring the prince is true, causing Toro to glance at her, unsure if she's being playful or serious. With a weary sigh, he replies that he'd rather not think about it at the moment. A few minutes later, they arrive back at the Grand Hotel, where a maid warmly greets them and politely asks whether Toro would prefer his meal first, or a bath. Though he's surprised by the maid's elegant greeting, Toro quickly composes himself and reminds himself not to get carried away. He turns to Mina and asks what she'd like to do next. She suggests having dinner first, followed by a bath. He proposes they eat in the room and unwind, and she agrees with a smile. Toro requests that their meal be served in the room, and the maid responds with courteous efficiency, promising to see it done. She hurries off to notify the others about the room service and bath preparations, while Mina teasingly comments that Toro is starting to act like nobility. He grins and jokingly tells her that if that's the case, she should start calling him Sadhu-sama. The following day, his designated day off, they sit together over breakfast. Mina asks if there's anything he'd like to do now that they're in the capital. Toro considers the upcoming meeting with the prince and decides he'd prefer a restful day. That means Mina won't get to wander alone either, but she doesn't seem to mind. He suggests they explore the city together, and she agrees enthusiastically. As they stroll through the lively streets, Toro asks Mina if she needs anything. She stops near a shop and says she'd like to pick up souvenirs for her family and younger brother, but reassures him that there's still plenty of time for that. Curious, Toro asks if she really has a younger brother, and she confirms it, saying he's about Toro's age and a big admirer of his. Apparently, her brother often talks about Toro's adventures, especially after watching puppet shows that reenact them, which leaves Toro both flustered and surprised. Mina adds that her brother's favorite part is when Toro famously drove off debt collectors using copper coins. Toro is shocked to hear how widely that story has spread. The memory makes him cringe, and he admits it always embarrasses him. Just then, Mina points to a nearby location and suggests they head over there. Curious, Toro asks where she's taking him, and she replies that it's close by. They arrive at the Lavender Magic Shop, and Toro is instantly impressed. As they walk in, an employee greets them warmly. Toro examines a nearby item and sees it's a magical storage backpack. The staff explains that it's a signature product, crafted by renowned magical artisan Gene Fellow. The price, 10 platinum coins, leaves Toro speechless, especially when he realizes it translates to 1 billion yen in his world. Despite the cost, he can't help but feel drawn to it. After all, magic storage is a staple in any fantasy setting. Mina then tells the staff she doesn't need anything that large and asks if they have smaller options. Toro asks if she's buying one, but she says she's just browsing and curious about the price, design, and functionality. The staff member sighs, telling them to follow him upstairs to view more options. They ascend and are greeted by an array of magical items filling the upper floor. Mina laughs as she gestures toward the items, casting a playful glance at Toro, which puzzles him. Then she slips on a pair of magic glasses and picks up a wand, startling the staff, who hurriedly whisper for her not to touch anything. After some playful browsing, Toro suggests they leave without buying anything. The staff mutters under his breath that he expected this but is quietly relieved when they finally exit. Outside, both of them burst into laughter, and Toro comments on how bold she was. Mina laughs back, reminding him that he had just as much fun by the end. The next day, riding in a royal carriage, Toro steps out and is awestruck at the sight of the royal mansion before him. As they arrive, the royal butler spots them, formally announces their presence, and greets them alongside the headmaids with polished grace, which only heightens Toro's anxiety. Toro had been briefed on what to expect in the royal mansion by the butler, whom he nicknamed Sabi for now, since he hadn't caught his real name. CV, presumably short for the butler's title or position, indicated the path and told Toro to follow him. As the grand gates opened, Sabi led the way, with knights forming an elegant escort around them, offering formal greetings. Sabi then explained that from this point onward, Toro's attendants would not be permitted further and directed them to a waiting room. CV instructed another man to guide them. Toro waved to Mina and told her he'd see her later. She smiled and assured him she understood. CV continued ahead, and soon they arrived at the prince's chambers. Toro took a deep breath and reminded himself that he could handle this. He knocked, introduced himself formally as Toro, and stated that he had come to teach reverse. The prince granted him entry, and Toro carefully pushed open the door to find the fifth prince, Flu. Toro noticed Flu's pointed ears and realized he was an elf, though Flu didn't match his expectations. Flu frowned and, clearly disappointed, remarked that Toro looked like just a kid. He doubted someone so young could really teach him. Toro respectfully responded that he was the top disciple of developer Mo, so his qualifications were sound. Still, Flu commented that Toro looked younger than himself, making Toro inwardly annoyed that the prince was judging him based on appearances. Flu pointed at a table where a limited edition reverse set was laid out and announced they should begin the lesson. Toro replied that he was looking forward to it. They began playing several rounds, but Flu grew increasingly flustered as he kept losing. Toro considered whether completely crushing Flu might be petty, but figured it was fair given Flu had underestimated him. After another loss, Flu snapped. He threw the reverse board into the air and burst into tears, shouting that Toro was too strong and wailing that he hardly ever lost before. Grabbing Toro by the collar, Flu demanded to know what trick he'd used. Though Toro hadn't cheated, he realized it was best not to antagonize the crying prince. He calmly told Flu he'd teach him, if he let go first. Flu released him and sat back down, sniffling. Standing tall, Toro seriously told him that the truth was, there were strategies and techniques to the game. He asked Flu if he was ready for intense training. Flu nodded confidently. Toro, with exaggerated drama, declared that he would teach him the ultimate techniques of reverse. A short while later, after demonstrating a few advanced moves, Flu asked if Toro had used those techniques to defeat Prime Minister Valeria. Toro confirmed that he had. Flu, impressed, thanked him and admitted that Toro was a good teacher. Toro replied with a sheepish laugh. Flu confessed that he had doubted the Prime Minister had truly lost to Toro. But now, seeing the techniques himself, he understood. That made Toro wonder if Duke Valeria hadn't held back even against a child. It suddenly struck him that the Prime Minister probably played seriously with everyone. Then, Flu gently grabbed his hand and said he wanted to defeat someone named Era, and asked Toro to help him do it. Toro agreed, and the two became fired up with determination. With a quiet sigh of relief, Toro reflected that things might have started rocky, but Flu wasn't a bad kid after all. From that point forward, Prince Flu's reverse He training officially began. It was initially scheduled for once a week, but quickly expanded to 3 sessions due to the prince's growing enthusiasm. Under Toro's intensive coaching, Flu's skill level skyrocketed in a short amount of time. Later that day, after returning to his lodging, the innkeeper cautiously approached Toro, apologizing for the disturbance and nervously inquiring if the royal carriage parked outside truly belonged to him. Toro, a bit flustered, awkwardly confirmed that it did. The innkeeper broke into a sweat, practically leaping down the stairs in panic. He fell to his knees, bowing deeply while apologizing profusely and begging to upgrade Toro to the luxurious royal presidential suite. Both Toro and Mina were taken aback, overwhelmed by the sudden dramatic gesture. The innkeeper eagerly added that the suite came with full-course gourmet meals, an extravagant evening accompanied by dancers, and wild experiences like barley bungee jumping and a jungle cruise featuring exotic creatures. Still in a frenzy, he insisted they notify the staff of any desires or requests, no matter how grand. Forcing a smile, Toro stammered out a reluctant, "Okay," all the while thinking that such over-the-top service was far too much for him to handle. Later, after relocating to a new accommodation closer to the castle, Mina remarked that they had to move out, and the previous innkeeper looked genuinely heartbroken. Toro explained that the previous staff had made such a huge fuss he felt guilty, but the pressure made it impossible to refuse. Just then, Sabi appeared to greet them, apologizing for the difficulty in arranging accommodations so close to the royal grounds. Toro was surprised when Sabi calmly replied that it was no trouble at all. Since Toro was an esteemed instructor to the prince, everything had already been handled by the starfish traders. Smiling, Toro praised Sabi's capability and accidentally thanked him, using a name he had previously made up on the spot. The moment turned tense as Sabi froze in shock, visibly flustered. He then admitted that he didn't recall ever giving his name. leaving Toro to awkwardly wonder if Sabi or Serbi was actually correct. The following day, Toro stood behind Prince Flu, who was preparing to face Duke Valera. In front of a gathering of high-ranking nobles, the Duke paused to assess the situation, then gave a knowing smile as Flu stood nervously across from him. At last, Duke Valera raised both hands and declared his surrender. Flu looked at him with tears of joy welling in his eyes. The two of them erupted in cheers over the unexpected victory. After the match, the group shared a lively conversation. Valera expressed his admiration, saying that Prince Flu had truly grown stronger thanks to Toro's coaching over the past month. Flu grasped Toro's hand repeatedly in gratitude, proudly acknowledging that it was all thanks to him that he had managed to defeat the formidable Duke. Flu then asked if he could simply call him Toro, and Toro agreed with a nod. In return, Flu offered to be called just Flu. Toro respectfully accepted, though he still instinctively called him Prince Flu. Flu insisted he drop the Prince title, but Toro admitted it might take some time to get used to. Suddenly, Toro heard a familiar voice in his head activating a special skill. It declared that by forming a bond with someone of high elf descent, he had gained access to elemental spirit magic. Fire, water, earth, wind, lightning, light, and dark. The revelation left him stunned. As Flu walked away, the voice activated again, this time confirming that Toro had formed a bond with royalty, unlocking the authority skill. Toro was overjoyed, but also slightly in disbelief that he had just earned two powerful new skills from this single encounter. Duvalier requested a private conversation with Toro, and Toro agreed without hesitation. The Duke brought up the earlier conversation about the confusing magical skill, and they began to delve into the topic. After several months, Toro's tutoring contract in the royal capital finally came to an end, and with it, he left behind the pressure-filled days he had spent in River Sea. He felt relieved at the prospect of finally being able to unwind, although he remained aware that, in another realm, spirit magic reigned as the most powerful ability. When he activated his flame magic, it flickered only faintly, no brighter than a small lighter's flame, and his water magic generated just enough liquid to quench thirst, revealing that both spells were at a basic, life-sustaining level. Still, he took comfort in knowing that consistent practice would gradually enhance his skills. What troubled him more deeply was the notion of authority. He questioned whether it had any relevance for someone of his humble status. He suddenly recalled having unintentionally made a child cry not long ago, right as someone called out to him from outside. Mina entered his room and asked if he was ready to leave. With a grin, he said he was all set and suggested they splurge on souvenirs, proudly displaying a bag full of coins. Before heading out, he thanked her sincerely and handed over the bag, explaining it was a gift of gratitude from Prince Flu and Duke Valia, an offer Toro gratefully accepted. He leaned over to Mina and remarked that the bag felt suspiciously light, to which she replied she wasn't sure, but mentioned that Prince Flu found it awkward to express thanks with money, though he insisted on giving it. When they finally peeked inside, they were astonished to find 20 platinum coins, an amount worth 200 million by his old world standards. Returning to the present, they found themselves again at the elevator magic shop, and he remembered how annoyed he had been with the staff's attitude previously, which had caused him to leave without making a purchase. As they walked in this time, the staff greeted them, but upon recognizing them, sighed skeptically, suspecting they might be back to cause trouble. Toro pointed to the magic bag and expressed his intent to buy it. The staff reminded him, as they had before, that it cost 10 platinum coins. With quiet confidence, Toro opened his bag of coins and stated that he would make the purchase. One staff member stared, and the second one signaled approval with a thumbs up. As the second staff member opened the case, he thought to himself that most customers only pretend they'll buy the bag and then try to steal it. The first staff member, still wary, suspected they might be thieves as well. But when Toro handed over the money and said he was paying immediately, the entire staff was taken aback and exclaimed in disbelief, demanding to know how someone so young had that kind of money. Toro then gestured toward the small magic storage pouch and said he wanted to buy that too, if they'd offer him a discount. Mina reminded him that he hadn't planned on purchasing it, but he replied that it was part of his bonus. She initially resisted, saying it was still worth a platinum coin and that she couldn't accept it. But he insisted, explaining that after all the work she had done alongside him for a month, it was the least he could do. Touched, she thanked him and accepted the gift with no further objections. Suddenly, a voice informed him that he had met the requirements for a special skill, magic storage, granted to those who spend money willingly, leaving him stunned. Disappointed by this revelation, he let out a sigh, causing Mina to worry and suggest maybe they should skip the purchase after all. He quietly tells Mina that his sigh wasn't out of regret. It was because the voice of the world had just granted him the magic storage ability. Both of them are stunned by the unexpected turn of events. Shortly afterward, they're walking through the bustling streets once again, and Toro is making numerous purchases, thinking that now, with magic storage, he can stock up on everything he might need while his funds last. He buys herbs, armor, books, paints, a wide assortment of items. Mina comments that it might be excessive, but Toro replies that while it is a lot, it's like a lifetime supply of necessities, so it's justified. Just then, he notices a woman nearby as they're about to walk past her. In a strange tone, she calls out to him, claiming she can sense the aura of another world radiating from him, causing Toro to freeze in shock. Then came the day they were scheduled to return home. It was just days after Toro's reverse engineering contract had been finalized. They gathered their belongings and loaded them onto the carriage. As they set off towards CC, Toro was lost in thought, reflecting on everything that had happened and contemplating the implications of Darvish's latest business proposal. The day before, Darvish had proposed establishing a reverse engineering workshop in the royal capital. Toro found the idea intriguing, but needed to weigh it against the ongoing success of operations in CC. He asked Darvish if it might be possible to produce luxury or limited edition boards in the capital, pointing out the likely availability of skilled artisans. Darvish agreed, noting that noble clientele in the capital would certainly value high-end exclusive products. They sealed the idea with a handshake, both anticipating future collaboration, though Toro couldn't shake the memory of the fortune teller's cryptic words. Toro then offered the small magic storage bag to Darvish, who hesitated and asked if he was really certain about giving it away. Toro reassured him, keeping to himself that Mina had declined it and that it had come as a bonus. He said he'd prefer to pass it on as a gesture of appreciation for Darvish's support. Surprised but interested, Darvish objected to Toro's steep 60% discount, countering with a 30% discount as more reasonable. Toro insisted, expressing his genuine desire to maintain a good working relationship with Darvish and Mob, the developer. Truthfully, he was hopeful for future collaborations. As they made their way back toward the CC Adventurers group, Darvish silently observed Toro, impressed by his lack of greed. Accepting the storage bag, Darvish felt grateful, and Toro was happy that the gift had been meaningful. Darvish then promised that the sales of the reverse products would be handled with care by Garfield's trading group. As they boarded the carriage, Toro waved goodbye, and Darvish warmly thanked him, saying it had been a pleasure working together. The journey back to CC began, and Toro felt a mix of emotions. Though the days had passed quickly, the experience had left a lasting impression. He reflected that this might be a farewell to the capital for now, and found himself wondering how everyone back in CC was doing, eager to reunite. During the ride, Paolo commented on how impressive magic storage was. It could hold all their belongings while taking up barely any space, significantly reducing the cost and burden of transporting goods by carriage. As Toro reflects on his experiences in the capital, the usefulness of magic storage, and adventuring with companions, he realizes he's living what many would call a dream life in another world. Or at least, that's how it should feel. Yet the cryptic words of the fortune teller, and those echoed by Prime Minister Valera, continue to weigh on his mind. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted by Mina, who warns him that there have been fresh sightings of bandits on the highway. He asks if it's the same group they ran into before, but she admits she doesn't know for sure, and advises that they stay alert regardless. She adds that adventurers' guilds across towns might be coordinating bounty hunts or reconnaissance. Toro silently hopes that Leo, Nemo, and the rest of their friends are doing well, wishing that nothing bad has happened. Later, upon their return to CC, the liveliness of the town quickly dispels his lingering unease. Paolo happily calls out that they've made it back to KC. Mina tells Toro it looks like their concerns were unnecessary. He jokes that her scary glare probably scared the trouble away, prompting her to ask if that was meant to be a compliment. With a wave, she says goodbye and mentions she needs to report to the guild, so she's heading off first. He nods and waves her off with a smile. Paolo brings up the idea of discussing the limited edition reverse boards and heads to the office. Before he can continue, Ney enthusiastically greets Toro, cutting Paolo off. Ney bombards him with questions about the capital, if he's okay, how teaching the nobles went, and even notes his new leather gear. He laughs and tells her to take a breath, promising to explain everything at the guild. Relieved, Ney admits she might have gotten too emotional but is just happy to see him safe. She waves and tells him she'll catch up with him later. Toro smiles, feeling comforted by how little has changed. He's truly home in CC. And so, Toro's return to CC was met with a flurry of activity. The limited edition reversible boards were entrusted to Capital craftsmen, though Paolo suggested Toro craft one uniquely valuable piece himself. It was agreed that his identity would remain a secret, and he would instead sign the work under the pseudonym Jiro Sugar. Of the 5 original limited edition boards, 3 were sent as gifts to Prince Flu, Prime Minister Valera, and Count CC, while the other 2 went to Darvish, unknowingly. These 5 boards would later go down in history as the legendary Sugar brand reverse boards. Months later, Toro found himself at the guild's quest board, carefully scanning the postings. Upon selecting one, he approached Nay with his choice. She saw that it was a goblin extermination mission and was impressed that he'd finally qualified for such a rank, which he proudly confirmed. Nay, concerned, asked if he felt confident going alone. He admitted he was a little nervous, but also knew it was time to push himself and grow through new challenges. She nodded with understanding, but still cheerfully reminded him not to overdo it. Moments later, he crossed into Goblin territory, immediately sensing an eerie and unsettling atmosphere. He remembered how he used to flee from danger without hesitation, but this time felt undeniably different. Activating his detection abilities and cloaking himself in stealth, he prepared for what lay ahead. Spotting 2 goblins nearby, he silently moved into position, readying for a surprise strike. He drew his bow, nocked an arrow, and aimed carefully at his unsuspecting targets. With precision, he released the arrow, striking one goblin squarely in the back. Without missing a beat, he pulled out his sword for the second target, leaping down from the tree with his blade leading the charge, and driving it straight into the goblin. Letting out a breath, he believed the skirmish was over, until a chill ran down his spine as he sensed another presence behind him. Just before that, he had been gathering goblin ears and magic stones to fulfill the quest requirements. Alert, he scanned the area, wondering if his earlier actions had drawn unwanted attention. His eyes widened as more goblins emerged, launching a surprise attack from behind. Reacting swiftly, he dodged the blows and deflected a close-range strike with his bow. Yet one goblin managed to land a glancing hit, forcing him to the ground in pain. Realizing he might have overestimated himself, he briefly considered retreating, but chose instead to hold his ground, sensing another path forward. As one goblin closed in, he realized the moment called for everything he had. The goblin hurled its knife toward him, and at that critical instant, a glowing symbol flared on his forehead. Channeling his authority skill, he halted the goblin's mid-attack. Not wasting a second, he struck down the 2 goblins in front of him and retrieved their magic stones. Then, drawing his bow again, he felled the final goblin from behind. Collapsing to one knee, he knew that without remembering his authority skill, he might not have survived. Though his body ached, he felt a quiet pride in handling the threat alone, but also recognized he had much more to learn. Before long, he returned to the guild, where others noticed his battered state. She rushed over, visibly concerned and panicked. When he remained silent, she gently touched his forehead, asking if he was okay and whether he was hurt, making him blush. Nearby adventurers couldn't help but envy the attention he received. She then expressed relief that he was safe and even managed to complete the quest. Leo chimed in with praise, admitting he hadn't expected Tora to pull it off and suggesting that maybe his talents were greater than he thought. Tora modestly replied that it had just been a stroke of luck, and that he still had a long way to go before calling himself a true adventurer. Leo ruffled his hair and said that sometimes luck is part of the journey, and that every step forward matters. Soon after, someone approached and informed Tora that a letter had arrived for him. Seeing that it came from Count CC left him curious and cautious. Later, upon arriving at Count CC's estate, the Count greeted him with haughty indifference, asking if he was Tora Sardo. He affirmed that he was. Count CC's scrutinizing stare unsettled Tora, making him feel exposed under the noble's cold gaze. Count CC explained that there was only one reason he summoned Toro that day. He wished for Toro to serve as his reverse mentor. In the capital's noble circles, Toro's reputation as a reverse technique master was unmatched. His name was widely recognized. The Count remarked that he'd heard rumors of Toro's close relationship with the Fifth Prince and the Prime Minister, and only recently realized that Toro resided within his own domain. Curious, Count CC wanted to meet him face to face, and Toro respectfully acknowledged this, noting that the Count didn't seem to carry any malicious intent. The Count formally asked whether Toro would accept the position of reverse mentor. Toro agreed without hesitation, deciding it was wiser to comply and avoid unnecessary friction. He began instructing Count CC and felt that things were off to a promising start. For now, everything seemed manageable. The following morning, Leo summoned every adventurer at the guild for an urgent gathering, sparking confusion about the early meeting. Toro turned to Nay for answers, and she explained that a quest had just come down from the capital, sent to all guild branches. Intrigued, Toro asked what kind of quest it was. Nay replied that it was a mission to eliminate highway bandits, making Toro wonder if it involved the same group they had encountered on their journey to the capital. Leo then called Toro to the front and announced that their guild would officially take part in the bandit suppression mission. As a first step, they would dispatch a scouting group made up of 3 teams, each consisting of 3 members. Cheek, an E-rank adventurer with merchant expertise, introduced himself to Toro and confidently said he'd handle negotiations. The team's leader, a D-rank adventurer with thief skills, introduced himself simply as Short. Toro shook hands with both and introduced himself, acknowledging that while this was a temporary arrangement, it was the kind of team he had long hoped to join. Ord asked if Toro possessed presence detection, and when Toro confirmed, he was surprised at how Q's AUT had known that detail. Ord then suggested they hold a planning session to align their strategy. During the meeting, Short outlined their plan to gather intel by visiting villages where bandit activity had been reported, relying on Cheek's negotiation skills and Toro's ability to sense presences. Once the area was narrowed down, Short would employ his scouting skills to locate the bandits' base. The strategy session concluded smoothly, and when Short told them to be ready to depart the next morning, everyone agreed. It would be Toro's first mission as part of a team, and knowing they were counting on him, he resolved to ensure the operation's success. 3 days later, a man intercepted 3 hooded travelers, demanding to know who they were. Cheek calmly explained that they had gotten lost while chasing a monster and asked if they could take shelter from the rain. He quietly remarked to Kozart that the villagers seemed unusually suspicious. In response, Art pulled out a pouch of money, assuring the man they wouldn't expect charity. They were willing to pay for their stay. After a pause, the man agreed, cautioning them to avoid entering the village and directing them to stay under the eaves of a shed. Just then, someone else appeared, calling out to the man, Burned, and questioning the presence of the strangers. The man warned Burned not to act impulsively. Toro was stunned when he recognized the voice. It was unmistakably his father's, and he appeared to be drunk. The shock hit him like a wave. Locking eyes with the man, Toro confirmed what he already feared. It really was his father. Unease crept over him as he wondered why his father would bring strangers into a village that clearly wasn't welcoming. Something felt off. He quietly whispered to Earth that his father was there, prompting Short to ask if it was the same man who had mistreated him in the past. Still whispering, Toro replied that it was, adjusting his hood as his father's gaze lingered on them. Moments later, Cheek turned to Ord and asked if the village gave off a strange vibe. Ord agreed, suggesting they retreat for the time being. Cheek then addressed Burn, noting that the rain didn't seem likely to stop, and explaining that they would call it a day. Attempting diplomacy, Cheek asked Marin if a discount on their shelter fee was possible, reminding Burn how dangerous it became with monsters after dark. Irritated, Burn shot back, accusing Cheek of trying to haggle. Apologizing, Cheek handed over 3 silver coins, 1 for each of them. Burn smirked, accepting the coins and saying they'd settle on that amount. The atmosphere, the villagers' behavior, and Hawk's presence there confirmed what they had suspected. This village was the bandits' hideout. As they raced through the forest, Toro admitted he'd been nervous their cover would be blown during the price negotiation. Cheek explained that paying too eagerly would have raised suspicion. Acting casually and offering payment earned the villagers' goodwill while lowering their guard. Both Toro and Short acknowledged Cheek's knack for negotiation, impressed by his finesse. Suddenly, they heard the sound of hooves. Riders were in pursuit. Short sensed something and alerted them that his sleuth skill had picked up incoming enemies. Cheek was surprised by how quickly they were discovered, then asked Toro again if that man had truly been his father. Toro confirmed it without hesitation. There was no doubt. Glancing back, he saw a rider fast approaching with fierce determination on his face. Observing the man's alert demeanor, Short surmised that Toro's father had likely reported them. Turning Cheek's head around, Short emphasized that they needed to retreat to safety immediately. While running, Ord explained that sticking to the main road would be too risky. They could be cornered. If they could cut through the forest and cross the mountains by nightfall, they might be able to lose their pursuers. The intelligence the trio had gathered on the bandit hideout was swiftly sent to surrounding regions by fast courier. This prompted a joint extermination quest launched by guild branches from across the region. The safety branch, too, was abuzz with activity as preparations ramped up. During a strategy meeting, Toro asked Leo to let him join the mission, citing his father's involvement. He couldn't risk causing more trouble for everyone. Leo studied him for a moment, sighed, and finally gave his approval. Toro's first large-scale mission was about to begin. As dawn approached on the day of the raid, adventurers gathered one by one. Roy pointed out the village in front of them, confirming it was their target. Toro nodded in agreement. Roy laid out the plan. They would divide into two teams. One would launch an attack from the rear to secure the stronghold and rescue any hostages, while the others would signal the start of the operation and strike the village to take the bandits by surprise. Due to the pouring rain, Toro and his team had failed to notice that the village was heavily fortified, with fences and watchtowers giving it the appearance of a stronghold. Because of his archery prowess and his talent for concealing his presence, Toro was assigned to the Forest Assault Unit. Though nervous, he understood their first priority, to silently eliminate the sentry. As he crept closer, he took aim and released his arrow, striking the lookout cleanly and bringing him down. With the guard neutralized, Roy signaled the rest of the team to advance. The others immediately moved in behind him. Although Toro's hands trembled, he forced himself to steady them. This was the first time he had directly attacked someone, even if they were bandits. The experience was jarring, marking a new threshold in his life as an adventurer. Roy approached and encouraged him, urging him not to hesitate. Toro nodded and reassured him that he was ready, reminding himself to stay focused on the mission. Meanwhile, one of their allies leapt onto the fence and took down the guard stationed there with a swift stab. He raised his hand to signal that the area was secure. Back on Toro's side, he noticed his fellow adventurers struggling to scale the high barrier. Reacting quickly, Toro accessed his magical storage and caused the entire section of the fence to vanish, leaving his teammates stunned at what they had just witnessed. Inside the compound, the bandit leader panicked at the sudden breach, demanding to know how the adventurers had infiltrated their defenses so easily. Elsewhere, Mino found herself surrounded by taunting bandits who told her to surrender. She responded with a fierce slash, repelling them with a powerful swing of her sword. Just as she was catching her breath, a wave of fire engulfed the enemies around her. Looking up, she saw the Catwoman casting a fire spell from afar to support her. Whisker, standing beside her, remarked that the flames would surely shake the enemy's morale. Back in the fray, Toro ran out of arrows. Without pause, he summoned his earth spirit magic and hurled stones with deadly precision, suppressing the enemies and shielding his team from harm. As the bandit leader barked orders to surround and overwhelm the adventurers with sheer numbers, he remained unaware of Roy sneaking up behind them. Meanwhile, his second-in-command was about to report that the fortress had already been lost, but Roy struck him down with a swift blow from the back of his sword. Turning to face them, the bandit boss tried to rally with overconfidence, boasting about his skills with the blade. Toro swiftly countered by casting his dark spirit magic, flinging it into the leader's face and blinding him. In the opening that followed, Nina surged forward and landed a powerful kick to the man's face, toppling him to the ground. Mina and Roy shot Toro a thumbs up, commending him on his perfectly timed support. Toro smiled and flashed a peace sign in return. Once the battle was over and the bandits were in custody, Mina personally thanked Toro for his help. He was just relieved he could contribute meaningfully. And so, the quest to subdue the bandits came to a successful end. Following that mission, Toro's skills began to gain wider recognition, and he became more active in temporary squads. During that time, he repeatedly received letters from the Baron of Sassi, who sought to recruit him into his service. However, Toro consistently declined, cherishing his freedom and life as an adventurer. One day, a knight burst through the doors of the Adventurers Guild with forceful authority. He unrolled a long scroll and asked for Toro by name, declaring that he was acting under the direct orders of the Baron of Sassi. Roy, angered by the intrusion, told the knight he couldn't just barge in like that, but the knight coldly dismissed him and demanded he step aside, further riling everyone in the guild. Leo asked what was going on, and Toro started to wonder if this was somehow related to him. As Toro's fame spread, the Viscount revealed that he had repeatedly sent envoys inviting Toro to become one of his vassals. Leo, furious with the Viscount's presumptuous behavior, had rejected each offer, arguing that Toro was a vital part of the guild. Undeterred, the Viscount sent a messenger directly to Toro, offering the lure of a luxurious lifestyle. Toro responded with polite humility, saying he wanted to continue his life as an adventurer and respectfully declined. The messenger stormed off, angrily grabbing his coat and warning Toro that he would regret refusing the Viscount's generosity. This left Toro feeling uneasy. He hadn't expected the situation to spiral like this and hoped it would simply blow over. Leo, equally troubled, asked how things had gotten so complicated, which only deepened Toro's concern. The head knight then stepped forward, explaining that the Lord had heard about a young adventurer who'd rejected his terms. Feeling insulted, the Viscount had grown enraged. Leo, puzzled by the wording, asked if the knight had said rumored. The knight confirmed, adding that Viscount CC had been especially irritated by tales of an adventurer gaining more admiration than himself in the city. The knight also claimed the messenger reported Toro had insulted him, which was the final spark that ignited the Lord's fury. Toro was genuinely confused, sure that he'd only turned the offer down with the utmost respect. Leo, seeing Toro's baffled reaction, turned to the head knight and defended him, saying Toro wasn't the type to insult anyone and that the real facts needed to be heard. The head knight admitted Leo's point but explained that the Viscount had refused to listen to reason. Frustrated, Leo said he would go speak to the Viscount himself and demanded the knights leave before things got out of hand. As the knights turned to leave, they noticed a growing crowd outside, gathering in support of Toro. Respectfully, the head knight acknowledged the situation and agreed to withdraw for now. As they left the guild, Toro quietly hoped this would finally put the matter to rest. Unfortunately, despite his hopes, the commotion only intensified as the news spread through the city. Toro's good deeds had earned him public admiration, so much so that a puppet show had been made about his role in defeating thieves. But not everyone was pleased. There were others who viewed his growing reputation with resentment, and tensions started to split the city of Sasi. Toro realized the situation had escalated far beyond what he'd anticipated. His companions reassured him, saying not to worry since the rumors were baseless and would eventually fade. Roy came over and told him that everyone knew he was a good person. The other adventurers chimed in, encouraging him not to take the accusations to heart. Some mentioned that their children were fans of Toro, and that only a few believed the slander. Moved by their support, Toro's eyes welled with tears, and he sincerely thanked everyone. But a few days later, early one morning, the knights returned to the Adventurers Guild once again. This time, the head knight entered carrying a scroll, and the atmosphere in the guild immediately turned hostile. Everyone sensed bad news. Toro turned to Nay and asked if something was wrong, but Nay told him not to step outside. Suddenly, the head knight shouted out that Toro was now suspected of involvement with a group of thieves and that a warrant had been issued for his arrest. Holding up the scroll, he demanded Toro surrender peacefully. Toro stood in stunned silence, unable to believe the accusation, while confusion and disbelief rippled through the guild. Leo, shaking with rage, shouted that it was ridiculous, but the knights immediately restrained him, telling him to calm down. Leo turned to the head knight with fury in his eyes, but the knight coldly warned that any resistance would not be tolerated. Anyone who interfered would be arrested as well. Roy called out to Leo, reminding him that if he got arrested too, there'd be no one left to help Toro. That calmed Leo down. The head knight then demanded again that Toro be handed over quietly. Realizing how far things had gone, Toro stepped forward, his heart heavy. He handed his sword to Nay, asking if she would hold on to it for him while he was gone. Nay took the sword solemnly, and Toro walked toward the knights, thinking he couldn't continue burdening the guild. The head knight declared his arrest and locked cuffs onto Toro's wrists. As they dragged Toro away, Leo shouted after him, promising that the guild would do everything it could to help. Nay rushed forward in tears, trying to reach him, while the others looked on in stunned helplessness. The guild's door slammed shut behind them. Later, Toro was beaten during his imprisonment. In the interrogation room, the interrogator sneered and asked if Toro's father was a thief. Toro replied that he'd been living in the guild as an adventurer before ever knowing about his father's crimes. He only found out during a bandit subjugation quest. The interrogator slammed a hand on the table and grabbed Toro's head, accusing him of helping his father escape. Toro insisted he was busy fighting at the time and couldn't have passed on any information. The interrogator struck him and yelled for him to shut up. Bruised and broken, Toro was eventually thrown back into his cell, unsure of what to do. His magic had been sealed, preventing him from even accessing his magic storage. But even in pain, Toro clung to hope. He believed in Leo, Nay, and everyone at the guild. He endured, waiting for their help. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, 2 weeks after Toro's arrest, Garfield sat restlessly, unable to hide his panic. Duke Valera entered the room and, noticing the urgency, asked Garfield why he had come unannounced, urging him to speak quickly. Garfield nervously said he needed to talk about Toro. The Duke raised an eyebrow, surprised, and asked what had happened. He then instructed Garfield to explain everything carefully. After Garfield recounted all that had happened to Toro, the Duke nodded gravely and said he understood the situation. Garfield assumed the Duke could save Toro, but the Duke told him to wait. This situation might require the intervention of His Majesty. Shocked, Garfield pleaded with the Duke to take action immediately. But the Duke explained that it wasn't that simple. Issues within a domain were expected to be handled internally. Complicating matters further, Viscount CC belonged to a faction led by Mackie Harger. Garfield asked if that faction opposed the Dukes, and the Duke confirmed it. He then advised Garfield that some nobles supported justice. They would need to rally those voices to draft a petition. They would also seek the Queen's support and involve Prince Flu, which astonished Garfield. And so, what began as the arrest of a single young adventurer had escalated into a political storm, one that threatened to shake the very foundations of noble power. When Prince Flu heard the news about Toro, he immediately thought it was absurd. CB, standing beside him, acknowledged his feelings but reminded him that it was highly unusual, nearly unprecedented, to directly advise the king and bypass his elder brother. Prince Flu agreed with CB's caution. He decided to meet with his brothers first and also ask for his mother's support. The two quietly finalized their plan, and thus, the young prince's bold counterplay against the prime minister, centered around Toro, the young instructor, quickly became the talk of the palace. It wasn't long before the king himself decided to act. Meanwhile, Toro still languished in prison, his spirit wavering. When the guards delivered his food, moldy bread and murky soup, he still crawled to it in hunger and bit into the bread. But moments later, his body went numb. He was paralyzed. It was poisoned. He stared at the floor, wondering if he should have just confessed to the crime he didn't commit. Just then, a voice echoed within him. Special skill condition confirmed. You have endured every hardship. He was granted status ailment resistance and status ailment recovery. Shocked, he could hardly believe it. The very voice of the world had responded to his suffering. He wondered if this was the destiny the fortune teller had once spoken of. He recalled her words, how she had sensed the vibrations of the world resonating from him. She had told him that she felt the essence of a hero within him, that he was chosen by fate to save their world. At the time, he had looked at Mina with confusion. But the fortune teller insisted that his skills would one day be vital, and that he must diligently prepare. Back then, he thought it was nonsense. But now, maybe that time had come. If this truly was his destiny, then he couldn't remain imprisoned any longer. Nearly 3 months passed since Toro's wrongful imprisonment. Now, in the royal court, Viscount CC knelt before the king. He bowed deeply, saying it was an honor to be summoned and flattering the king's presence as a blessing upon them all. The king, seated in quiet authority, addressed him, stating plainly that he must know why he was summoned. Viscount CC began to sweat. Stammering, he claimed ignorance, saying he was afraid he did not know. The king then stated bluntly that he had heard disturbing rumors that the Viscount had imprisoned an innocent young man under false charges. The reverse tutor, the king added pointedly. The Viscount's face went pale as the king continued, explaining that he had received numerous petitions and appeals for Toro's release. The level of concern had reached the throne itself. The king tapped his fingers slowly on the armrest of his throne, each tap cutting through the silence like a gavel. "What do you have to say for yourself?" he asked coldly. Viscount CC trembled under the weight of the king's gaze, unable to form a response. Then the king reminded him, while governance of a domain was typically left to its lord, the royal court could not ignore a public outcry over the unjust imprisonment of an innocent. The Viscount, wiping sweat from his brow, stuttered a response, that he had come to understand Toro's innocence, and that he had already begun the process for Toro's release. He then prostrated himself on the floor, apologizing to the king for the trouble he had caused. But everyone present in the court knew the truth. The arrest had been his own doing, and now he was simply lying in desperation to save himself. Despite the tension, the king firmly proclaimed Toro's innocence, expressing his relief upon hearing it from the Viscount. The king then dismissed the Viscount, who acknowledged the order and departed, visibly shaken. Turning to Duke Guido Valeria, the king inquired if the resolution met his expectations. The Duke responded that he had only raised a concern, and now held no further objections regarding the count. Prince Flu expressed heartfelt gratitude to his father for stepping in. Thus ended the dramatic chapter of Toro's arrest, an affair that had reached even the king's ears. The next morning at the Adventurers Guild, the lively branch members read the newspaper announcing Toro's release. Cheers broke out among them. Unaware that Toro was right outside the guild doors, He opened the door, stepped inside, and as the adventurers rushed toward him, he simply said he was back. Nay burst into tears at the sight of him, bruised, battered, and barely standing. She rushed to him and embraced him tightly, weeping as she whispered her welcome home. The Baron of CC faced widespread criticism, not only from the Adventurers Guild, but also from merchant associations, including the Garfish traders. Still, since he was a feudal lord, open condemnation from the public remained cautious and subdued. A doctor treated Toro's internal wounds, advising him to take it easy for a while. Toro, however, simply said he was glad to sleep in a soft bed again, leaving Nay quietly heartbroken as she watched over him. Leo gave him a gentle tap on the head and said that if he still had the strength to joke, then he must be doing all right. He then turned to comfort Nay, who was crying beside Toro. Though Leo was relieved, Nay's concern was still heavy. In time, Toro steadily regained his strength and returned to his sword training. A mysterious voice informed him that he had successfully recovered from near death and gained the rare super regeneration skill. Toro was stunned by the news, realizing he had obtained something truly extraordinary. With newfound purpose, he decided it was finally time to do something special for CC by cooking a heartfelt meal in return. Soon after, he was back at the guild, working alongside Leo and Nay in the kitchen. Leo glanced at the overflowing table of ingredients and commented that Toro had gone overboard again, most of it sourced from the capital. Curious, they asked what he intended to cook with such rare items. Toro explained that during his stay in the capital, he was inspired to create a new addition to the Relaxing Inn's menu. It was a dish he personally craved and wanted everyone else to experience. Leo and Nay exchanged puzzled looks and both asked him what the dish was. Toro answered with a smile. Curry rice. He described it as an enchanting dish that could captivate anyone's taste buds. When asked how it was made, he paused to think before replying that while he remembered eating it once, the exact spice blend remained a mystery. Over the next month, attempting to recreate curry powder turned out to be far more difficult than expected. The kitchen was soon overwhelmed with pungent spice aromas, enough to draw complaints. After enduring countless trials, watery eyes, and spice-induced tears, Toro finally succeeded. He completed his masterpiece, a steaming plate of curry rice, now proudly featured on the inn's unique menu. After a discussion between the innkeeper of the Relaxing Inn and the tavern owners across the street, they agreed that Toro would finance the renovations needed to transform the tavern into a curry-themed restaurant. Once the work was finished, the new establishment officially opened to the public. While sharing a meal, they noticed a crowd pouring into the restaurant and remarked to Toro that it had become an instant sensation. However, Leo reminded him that he would still need to restart from G rank due to guild regulations. Toro calmly reassured him, acknowledging that he hadn't accepted a quest in over 5 months. They asked if he truly wanted to register using only the name Toro. He confirmed, explaining that he still felt uneasy about using his father's surname, which was linked to infamous bandits and already known among the nobility and the royal court. Besides, he wanted to experience life simply as Toro. They nodded, acknowledging that he had already made up his mind. With a warm smile, Toro affirmed his decision. He wanted to live as just Toro, nothing more. Toro then brought up the topic of the Relaxing Inn's profits in a discussion with Leo. Leo explained that they had been considering taking over the rights to the inn's revenue and asked if Toro was truly okay with that arrangement. Toro agreed, stating that he would need the funds to support his upcoming move. Leo paused briefly before responding. He said that if Toro was sure, then they would go ahead with the purchase. However, the curry shop was off the table. Toro had built it from scratch, and it was deeply personal to him. While management would be handled by others, Toro would retain ownership and be able to access the shop's earnings from any guild branch. This gesture moved Toro deeply, bringing tears to his eyes. He bowed to Leo in gratitude, humbled by their support. Leo gently ruffled his hair and reminded him that there was no need to thank him, asking if he remembered what he had said the day they first met. A grand farewell party was later held at the Adventurers Guild to send Toro off. Nay wept as she embraced him tightly, begging him not to forget them. When it was time to leave, Nay asked if he had everything he needed. He replied that he was ready. Leo asked if he planned to say his farewells in the capital as well, and Toro confirmed that he would. Leo wished him safe travels, and Nay, still tearful, told him to take care, even though she believed he would be fine. Toro gave a deep, respectful bow, filled with sincere gratitude for everything they had done for him. Mina asked if it was time to depart, and Toro thanked her for agreeing to escort him to the capital. Toro, who had chosen to be reborn in this world of his own free will, now set out on a new journey, guided once more by destiny. After a long and eventful trek, they finally reached the royal capital. Toro expressed his appreciation to Mina for her help, and just then, he noticed a mysterious blue light flickering ahead. Captivated, he chased it through the crowded streets. The light came to a stop in front of a fortune-teller's booth. She greeted him, as though they'd met before. Perceiving the many questions swirling in his mind, she welcomed his inquiry. Toro confirmed, asking about his prophecy and where fate would lead him next. The fortune-teller offered a cryptic response, naming the next destination he must seek. Following her advice, he arrived at a place called Dancer's Village. As he approached the gates, one of the guards noticed the guild pendant hanging around his neck. With a lazy tone, the guard told him that if the guild endorsed him, he was free to enter, though he warned Toro that the village of Dancer didn't take kindly to outsiders and advised him to stay out of trouble. Toro nodded and thanked the guard. As he stepped inside, his nerves on edge from the gatekeeper's indifference and the cold stares of the locals. Glancing around, he recalled that the guild hall was marked by a blue roof. Soon, he spotted it, though its roof had a large gaping hole. He stepped in, drawing a confused look from the receptionist. Displaying his pendant, he declared that he intended to base his operations in the village. The receptionist placed the pendant into a scanning device and told him to wait a moment. But upon discovering his novice rank, she seemed disappointed and simply gestured toward the quest board. Feeling that this was the coldest reception he'd ever received at a guild, Toro asked where he might find a place to stay. She curtly informed him there was only one inn, 2 houses down, and that it didn't even have a name. He thanked her and soon arrived at a rundown building, questioning whether it really was the right place. Inside, the innkeeper eyed him and asked what he wanted, making it clear the inn wasn't a hangout for children. Toro pulled out his storage pouch and requested a room, surprising the innkeeper by paying in advance, 10 nights in silver coins. Though taken aback by the payment, the innkeeper coldly pointed him toward the second room from the back. Entering the room, Toro found it filthy, the doorknob broken. But even so, he was relieved to have shelter. Sitting on the bed, he inspected the doorknob and made a mental note to fix it later. He gave himself a small pep talk, deciding that this would be his base for now, and resolved to take on some quests. Back at the guild, he noticed a quest for roof repairs. Knowing he couldn't afford to be selective as a G rank, he accepted and set out to explore the village. Climbing onto the guild roof using his woodworking knowledge, gained from making reverse traps and his precision ability, he knew the repairs would be simple. Activating his precision skill, he got to work fixing the hole. Within minutes, the repair was complete, leaving the receptionist stunned. As he descended, she asked if he was Toro and whether he truly had woodworking skills, surprised by how flawless the repair was. Toro simply asked if the quest was considered complete. She replied coolly that it was and told him to wait while she processed the paperwork. As she worked, she noted that he had already cleared enough quests to meet the criteria for promotion. She informed him that he had now reached F rank. Toro thanked her and accepted his upgraded adventurer's pendant. Moments later, as he inserted the key into his room door, he felt someone glaring at him. Turning around, he saw a fellow adventurer who asked if he was new in town. The man introduced himself as Bob and asked if Toro was also an adventurer. Toro confirmed with a handshake, saying he was, more or less. Bob grinned and said he looked forward to working with him, adding that his own room was at the back as well. Bob, an E-rank adventurer, was glad to hear that Toro had just advanced to F rank. He offered his support, promising to lend a hand or share advice whenever Toro needed it. Bob then recalled something and mentioned that Chloe, the receptionist, had told him about Toro repairing the guild's roof. Waving goodbye with a grin, Bob jokingly asked Toro not to give him more trouble to clean up. Toro smiled back, grateful to have met someone so kind, and promised himself he'd start strong by tackling F-rank quests the next day. The following morning, he headed into the forest carrying a basket in hand. Toro's Eyes of Truth skill, originally used for appraising objects, became even more effective when combined with his flora knowledge and presence detection. He had developed a unique technique for gathering herbs efficiently while remaining alert to danger. Thanks to this, he spotted someone being chased by 4 goblins. Rushing to the scene, he was shocked to find that it was Bob under attack. Without hesitation, Toro loosed 2 arrows, hitting their marks. Then he activated his authority skill, freezing the remaining goblins in place. He quickly followed up by slashing them down with his sword. Hurrying to Bob's side, he asked if he was okay, but was alarmed to find that Bob had been poisoned. Panicked, Toro called out to him in distress. Realizing time was of the essence, He told Bob he'd begin treatment immediately. He applied healing cream to Bob's wounds and made him drink a recovery potion. But suspecting that the potion alone wouldn't suffice, Toro decided to mix it with an anti-poison potion to improve Bob's chances. He then used his status ailment recovery skill to cleanse the poison from within. A few moments later, Bob began to relax, his breathing returning to normal. Relieved, Toro determined the treatment was enough for now. Still, he carried Bob in his arms, urging him to hang on as they made their way back to the village. Before long, they reached the local pharmacy. The doctor informed Toro that the timely treatment had saved Bob's life and assured him he would recover. Toro expressed his relief and asked if Bob could rest there until he regained strength. But the doctor refused bluntly, saying his job was done and that Toro needed to take Bob elsewhere. Taken aback by the doctor's cold response, Toro was reminded again of the villagers' distrust of outsiders. He helped Bob out of the pharmacy, quietly reflecting on the town's chilly reception, and recalling the gatekeeper's warning about how unwelcome strangers were in Dancer's village. They made it back to the inn, where Toro gently laid Bob on the bed to rest. Bob slowly woke, confused, and asked where they were. Toro explained that they were at the village inn, and that he had found Bob unconscious in the forest, treated his wounds, and purged the poison. He reassured Bob that he would be okay. Bob nodded in understanding and apologized for the trouble, but Toro waved it off, asking if Bob had been on a quest. Bob explained that he'd been handling a monster cleanup near the wayside shrine, which puzzled Toro. He asked if Bob meant that shrine, and Bob confirmed it. Bob elaborated that the shrine was dedicated to the village's long-standing deity, but the area had grown dangerous due to increased monster activity. As a result, the festival honoring the deity had been canceled for years. Toro asked if that was why Bob had taken on the cleanup quest. Bob confirmed, adding that something about the shrine felt off. Intrigued, Toro asked Bob what he meant. As one of the canine folk, Bob said he trusted his nose and instincts above all. He explained that the shrine gave off a suspicious, unpleasant scent. Though faint, he added that the same smell lingered in the village. It was unmistakable. Toro admitted that while the village seemed peaceful, something still felt off. He asked if Bob believed the shrine was the source of it all. Bob nodded and mentioned that a local once told him the villagers were very welcoming. Toro shook his head, pointing out how untrue that had turned out to be. Saddened, Bob agreed. Still, he said he owed the village a debt, and despite the risks, he was determined to uncover the truth behind the shrine. Toro offered to help, insisting that even if he wasn't high-ranked enough for the official quest, he wanted to assist. Bob cautioned him that it would only deepen his involvement, but Toro stood firm. He was doing it out of his own will and had already decided to follow Bob into the forest. Grateful, Bob accepted his help and thanked him. Drawing his sword, Bob vowed not to mess up this time. Together, they made their way toward the forest shrine. Toro followed close behind, activating his presence detection and stealth cloak skills as they moved. Spotting a goblin nearby, he paused, unsure if he should let it go. When he checked again, the goblin had vanished, and he sighed in relief. Continuing forward, he used presence detection once more and felt Bob's presence nearby. But along with it, he sensed multiple others approaching. Emerging from the bushes was a swarm of goblins, among them a goblin sorcerer. It was Toro's first time seeing one. He immediately guessed that it had been the sorcerer who poisoned Bob before. Goblin sorcerers were rare, intelligent, and dangerous foes capable of wielding magic. Toro noticed the goblins were gathering near a structure and wondered if that was the shrine Bob had mentioned. Seeing the goblins entering it, he began to suspect that the shrine was far more dangerous than they'd thought. He debated whether to wait for the goblins to leave, but worried Bob might already be nearby. Hearing a rustle in the bushes, he feared he might be too late. Bob emerged, and Toro tried to warn him quietly, but the goblin sorcerer had already spotted him. Bob shouted, accusing the goblins of desecrating the shrine. In response, the goblins charged at him. Though Bob fought valiantly with both swords, he was quickly overwhelmed. Toro realized things had spiraled beyond what either of them could handle alone. He then saw the goblin sorcerer casting a spell. Toro shouted a warning, but Bob was frozen in shock. Without thinking, Toro fired an arrow at the sorcerer, but it was blocked midair by a blade. A goblin knight had stepped in to protect the sorcerer. Toro yelled at Bob to watch his back, but the warning came too late. Activating his dark magic, Toro launched an attack to scatter the goblins and shouted for Bob to regroup. Bob agreed, and together they fled. Moments later, they were still running, hearts pounding and danger behind them. After glancing behind them, Toro told Bob he believed they were finally at a safe distance. Bob asked if he was hurt, and Toro reassured him that he was unharmed. Gratefully, Bob thanked him for saving his life, but Toro simply said it was no big deal. Bob admitted, somewhat sheepishly, that he had a habit of pushing things too far before realizing it. Toro smiled, saying that what mattered was that they both made it out. Bob then suggested they report everything to the guild, and Toro agreed. Later, they arrived at the guild building, where Chloe was shocked to hear about both a goblin sorcerer and a goblin knight occupying the shrine. Bob urged her to request reinforcements immediately. However, Chloe reminded him that the last time they tried that, everyone except Bob had deserted the place. Bob asked about the guildmaster, hoping he might help, but Chloe revealed that the guildmaster had grown fed up with the villagers' cold behavior and quit 3 months ago, leaving her to handle everything alone. Toro realized the situation was even more dire than they'd thought. If those who left had spread word of the village's hostility, it was unlikely any adventurers would want to take missions there. As Bob had mentioned, unless the source of the problem was dealt with, the village couldn't be saved. That meant it was up to the two of them to handle the goblin threat. Chloe issued them both an emergency quest to eliminate the goblins, with no time restriction. Toro hesitantly accepted, and Chloe entrusted the task entirely to them. Toro turned to Bob, declaring that it was up to them to defeat the goblins. Bob, though hesitant, warned that it seemed nearly impossible for just 2 people to defeat not only a horde, but a sorcerer and a knight as well. Toro chuckled, saying they didn't have to beat them all at once, which made Bob immediately notice Toro's mischievous grin. From that day forward, the duo began a careful and strategic extermination of the goblins near the shrine. Knowing goblins usually operated in packs, Toro chose to play it safe, taking them down one by one. He picked off a goblin with a well-placed arrow, and little by little, he and Bob reduced their numbers. Eventually, Toro determined they had eliminated all of the regular goblins. That meant the sorcerer and the knight would now have to leave the shrine to hunt for food themselves, creating an opening. Still, Toro understood that those 2 enemies were much stronger than they were. When it came down to it, Bob's strength would be essential to their victory. Just then, the goblin knight stepped out of the shrine. Bob asked if they should attack, but Toro replied, "Not yet." The knight looked around cautiously, then began to advance. Seizing the opportunity, Toro fired an arrow and shouted, "Now, Bob!" Bob charged forward without hesitation. The arrow struck the knight's helmet, making it turn angrily and block Bob's assault with its shield. Channeling his spirit energy, Toro cast dark magic, shouting, "Try this on for size." The spell ignited the knight from within, burning it internally. Bob took the chance to slash across its face with his dual swords, but the knight retaliated with a powerful counterstrike, sending Bob flying. Toro immediately closed the distance and stabbed the knight in the shoulder with precision. Just then, Toro sensed the approach of the goblin sorcerer and quickly warned Bob. Bob froze for a moment, but the hesitation cost him. He was slashed by the goblin knight, prompting Toro to shout his name in panic. Reacting swiftly, Toro tried to drive his sword into the knight's chest, but the knight deflected the strike and knocked his weapon aside, following up with a brutal sword thrust that pierced Toro's abdomen. The knight laughed cruelly as Toro trembled in agony, then collapsed to the ground while the knight let out a triumphant roar. But Toro wasn't finished. Gritting his teeth, he reached for his fallen sword. He forced his battered body to rise and gathered all his remaining strength, plunging the blade into the goblin knight's neck, finally slaying it. Breathing heavily, Toro dropped to one knee, pain washing over him, and sensed the goblin sorcerer's presence behind him. Without delay, he activated his super regeneration ability. Smoke curled from the sorcerer's mouth as it hissed, "Monster!" then unleashed a massive burst of flame, while Toro concealed himself using his spirit-infused dark magic. In the meantime, he poured a potion into Bob's mouth, urging him to recover quickly. The sorcerer rained fire everywhere, forcing Toro to break cover. As it launched another fire attack, unaware that Bob was moving again, Toro narrowly avoided the blaze, and the sorcerer growled that this time it wouldn't miss. But before it could strike again, Bob appeared behind it, ready. He slashed the sorcerer across the head and collapsed, drained. Catching sight of Toro, he gave him a thumbs up. Toro responded with a tired smile and sank to the ground. He thanked Bob for saving his life, but Bob reminded him he'd only returned the favor and thanked him back. Toro then asked if Bob could go ahead and report the quest as completed. Bob agreed, but asked what Toro planned to do. Toro admitted he was curious about the shrine's interior. As Bob departed, Toro stepped inside. Using his light magic to illuminate the shrine, Toro looked around. It appeared empty, but a dense presence of dark spirits loomed. In the center, he saw a large structure and wondered if it was some kind of goblin totem. The stench and appearance were nauseating, so he decided to purify and dispose of it. But as he got closer, a force repelled him. Realizing the totem was cursed, he was relieved he hadn't touched it directly. The dark spirits swirled around him as if trying to communicate. Toro asked if they wanted him to purify the stone as well. Receiving a silent confirmation, he cast the purification spell. As the light magic washed over it, strange letters formed on the stone, releasing dark energy. A voice then echoed, stating he had met the special condition of becoming the savior of 10 dark spirits, and granted him the ability, Dark Spirit Magic Limit Release. Toro was stunned as the glowing words on the stone began to fade. When they vanished completely, a shadowy hand extended from the stone. A dark spirit emerged, introducing itself as Pluto and thanking Toro for rescuing it. Pluto explained that a powerful curse had infected the sacred stone, slowly poisoning the village. As gratitude for lifting the curse, Pluto bestowed Toro with the blessing of the dark spirit. The blessing enhanced Toro's dark magic, amplifying both its strength and effectiveness, while also boosting his resistance to it. Already immune to status effects, Toro wouldn't suffer from the mental or physical impairments normally caused by such spells. Pluto explained that this was all he could offer given his current strength. Toro gratefully thanked him, sincerely acknowledging how helpful the gift was. Pleased to be of assistance, Pluto said his goodbyes, mentioning how long it had been since he'd seen the world outside. He then vanished from the shrine, showing no discomfort despite the bright sunlight. Toro could feel the power of the dark spirit coursing through him and marveled at the strength it granted. If Pluto was right, then the village's curse should now be lifted. Toro left the shrine and made his way toward Bob. Upon spotting him, Bob called out with relief, saying he had been about to search for Toro and was worried something had happened. He thanked Toro for helping wipe out the goblins, but Toro insisted that Bob had saved him in the end, so they were even. Bob then noticed the foul smell that had plagued the area was now gone, and asked if Toro had done something. Toro admitted he wasn't entirely certain, but it looked like the curse had been broken. Bob was stunned and asked if it was really true. Toro explained that, based on what the spirit had said, it appeared to be the case. Bob and Chloe shared confused glances, both wondering what spirit Toro was referring to. Chloe stepped forward, assuring Toro that the guild would reward him properly for completing the urgent quest, and thanked him with genuine gratitude. Toro redirected the praise to Bob, saying that if Bob hadn't noticed the oddities and taken action, he wouldn't have done anything at all. Bob recalled how he thought it was over for him when the Goblin Knight landed that blow, and said that if Toro hadn't made the call when he did, he wouldn't be standing here now. He then offered to reimburse Toro for the potion used to save him, but Toro declined, mentioning it had been a homemade concoction. Both Bob and Chloe were stunned by that revelation. Chloe noted Toro's impressive range of talents, archery, woodworking, and now potion crafting, implying he must be skilled in apothecary arts as well. Bob was amazed and called Toro incredible, but Toro modestly stated that all he really had was the garbled tech skill, which left both of them puzzled and a bit disheartened. Bob apologized, realizing Toro must have had it rough, and Chloe also offered her apologies for showering him with praise without knowing the full story, acknowledging how hard he must have worked. Toro understood their reaction. In this world, the garbled tech skill was infamous, often called the unfortunate or even useless skill. It was only natural they'd feel sympathy. When they entered the village, they were greeted by joyful villagers. Chloe commented on how peaceful things seemed again, and Bob agreed, noting how the atmosphere had completely changed since his arrival. Proof that the village had truly been saved. With pride, Bob and Toro bumped fists in quiet celebration. Looking at his hand, Toro silently vowed to use his newfound powers to help people wherever he was needed. For that, he believed, was the true purpose of his journey to another world.